Chapter 626. White ladies are weak to fire. According to the gazillion books I consulted recently, they burn like gasoline. I don't know what kind of relationship these two have, but if they coordinate their attacks, I'll be in a pinch. I must even the field. Lith thought. The mage slayer ignored the white lady's grievances and jumped at Lith's spell, incapable to see past the meal served in front of itself. Lith dispelled his air dome and struck with the gatekeeper's sword infused by darkness magic, the only element mage slayers couldn't feed upon. The creature was unable to scream, but its eyes went wide open as the enchanted metal pierced through the orange gas, creating a gaping hole the size of a soccer ball on its chest for a split second. Solace, wasn't his heart supposed to be there? Lith asked. Their vengeful heart was the source of all the powers a mage slayer had, and also their weak point. Only a physical weapon could destroy it, but finding it wasn't easy. The undead could move it freely inside their gaseous body, even while they were fighting. Yes, it was. Now it's in the nether regions. She replied. Litha's life vision was blinded by the magical gas that made up the mage slayer's body, but her mana sense was keen enough to follow the heart's movements. The white lady had never stopped hurling new water. She was using it to shape a water cage to drown Lith. He was an adult, so he was bound to taste like horseshit, but beggars couldn't be choosers. Lith blocked the lunge of the mage slayer, interrupting both its attack and its spell while unleashing a stream of lightning from his hand. The electricity traveled through the water and entered the white lady's mouth, setting her ablaze from the inside. It wouldn't have been so easy in normal circumstances. The starvation had turned her flesh into dried meat, making it even more inflammable than a white lady already was. The undead turned into a pyre while screaming in agony. It took her less than a second to be reduced to a wet pile of ashes. Now that Lith could focus on a single opponent, he conjured a thick layer of spirit magic around himself. It would be useless against a gaseous opponent, but the enchanted blade the mage slayer was using was physical. Lith used spirit magic to envelope the sword more each time it clashed with his gatekeeper, making it slower as his grip over the blade of the enemy became stronger. The mage slayer wasn't able to use fusion magic, and with its sword being constantly pulled in random directions, it was unable to complete a single spell. Soon the second undead was at Litha's mercy. Spirit magic kept its blade locked in Litha's left hand, while the gatekeeper in his right hand cut through its body so fast that its heart was perfectly visible, no matter where the mage slayer moved it. Lith cut the heart into small pieces and kept cutting it until the smoke stopped regenerating. Unfortunately, the sword disappeared as soon as the undead was vanquished. A mage slayer's physical body actually consisted of two parts, the heart and the blade. It's very odd, Solace. According to the books, the sword should be an exact replica of the Blade Master's weapon. Yet in the pictures we found, their enchanted weapons had nothing special. I'd remember so many runes. Lith thought. Yeah, it's likely due to Huriel being very ancient. If the mage slayer was centuries old, maybe so it was the forge mastering process they used when it was still alive. It's too bad that conjured blades have no pseudo-core. We might have learned a lot. She sighed. Look at the bright side. If the path in front of us continues to be straightforward, those creatures would have reached the exit in no time, and then we would have been forced to come here to slay them. Not only did we save ourselves a trip, but also we might get deeper inside the city than anyone else ever managed to. Lith replied, regretting his words the moment he thought them. Way to jinx it, Lith. Solace chuckled, hoping that for once they would be lucky. Before moving on, Lith searched the room. The dormitory was a long rectangular room, at least 100 meters, 330 feet, long with 4 poster beds lined up against the wall. In front of each bed, there was a dimensional chest, ready to be imprinted. This is even odder. According to Professor Wainmeyer, a magical item that's not imprinted can't last long. Then how can these dimensional chests be in perfect condition? Lith thought. Maybe they are also full. Solace said, I told you to look at the bright side, not to start daydreaming. This is barely the 3rd room. We might as well be like the 100th visitor or something. Lith still imprinted one of the chests to probe its contents. It contained a chamber pot, some kind of odd-looking pajamas, and a set of items for personal hygiene. This place must be very old if they expected the residents to use chamber pots. It means they had yet to discover how to use mana crystals to obtain tap water. Lith thought. Their path kept being straightforward only for a few more rooms. Lith found a training weapons warehouse, an office filled with paperwork written in an unknown language, and a canteen bigger than the village of Lusha before they met a crossroads. At that point, Lith checked his pocket watch and started to draw a map. During his past visits, he had never managed to get very far due to his busy schedule and the abundance of monsters. According to the army's information, every time a monster was killed, it was sent back to square one, near Huriel's core. Also, the city was built on multiple levels, and all the rooms would be shuffled every time the labyrinth rearranged itself. Lith had no idea what floor the city core was on, nor where the good stuff could be stored. Yet the prospect of finding ancient artifacts and study the pseudo-core of a being capable of resurrecting its minions without taking away their free will drove him to continue his search. After several more offices, pantries, and even an inner garden bigger than a football stadium, Lith was about to run out of time. He started to run and avoided searching the rooms hoping to find something useful. When he stumbled into a forge mastering lab, Lith knew that it would be his last stop. There were so many enchanted items to almost blind their magical senses. The forge in the middle of the room was made of an unknown metal. One second it was white with black veins all over it, and the next second it was black with white veins. The forge was solid, but its surface constantly changed, as if there were two colliding forces battling for dominion over it. Lith struck it with the hilt of the gatekeeper, making it emit a crystal-clear sound he had never heard before. "Solus, this thing isn't made of adamant, right?" he asked while placing his hand on the forge and using invigoration. "Nope. I have no idea what it is, but its mana flow is magnificent." Lith couldn't agree more. Unlike his adamant forge, the one in front of him was able to draw in the world energy and compress it to the point it almost had a pseudo-core even though it wasn't enchanted. Chapter 6:27. Lith tried to lift the forge, but it weighed too much, even for his inhuman strength. "Damn, without dimensional magic, we cannot store it nor warp it away." Lith inwardly cursed non-stop. "You could make it float with a spell, but this thing is too big to get it out of here by crushing through the walls. The cursed object that oversees this place would kill us before we manage to escape," Solus said. Lith tried to lift it with a spell anyway. Much to his surprise, an external source of mana blocked his spell, and the room started to rumble as an earthquake was about to bring down the roof. The quake stopped the moment Lith let the forge go. "Let's run away. There's enough mana surrounding us to kill you in the blink of an eye," Solus warned him. Lith waited a few minutes and resumed searching the room only when Solus confirmed to him that the hostile mana was fading. Even if it was very old, it was still a forge mastering lab. After working for 2 years at the White Griffin, Lith knew how such places were built. He ignored the open cabinets and went straight for the test room, where any competent forge master kept his prototypes. A weapon rack full with all kinds of swords covered in blue runes was waiting for him. Yes, Lith started picking them up, but after the first blade the rumbling resumed, forcing him to put them back in their place except for one. A second attempt to collect more than one sword confirmed his intuition. Okay, fine. They all have the same spell on them after all. Lith's Sour Grapes claim was followed by a quick read of the textbooks stored in the libraries. Once again, he could only pick one or pay the consequences. The problem was that they were all written in gibberish, and he was dangerously running out of time. The only silver lining in Lith's situation was that even if he was unable to understand the words, and all the magic circles depicted were unknown, the basics of forge mastering were still the same. Lith and Solus were instantly able to tell the tier of an enchantment just by looking at the complexities of the drawings and the number of pseudo-cores each spell was devised to handle. They picked a small book that was filled with only complex tier 5 forge mastering spells. Let's just hope they actually have a practical use. With my luck, they might as well be just teaching spells. Lith choked on those words, finally realizing why the Huriel seemed so familiar to him. The furniture's design was outdated and he had met the rooms in a random order, but too many things inside the lost city reminded him of the White Griffin Academy. Lith would have liked to put his intuition to the test, but there was no time. He used his flight spell to backtrack, moving as fast as he could while checking the map to not get lost. Solus couldn't help him this time. She was too focused keeping watch against possible threats. "Watch out. Something big and powerful is coming our way," she warned him. Lith turned to his right just in time to see an incredibly handsome man with emerald hair and purple eyes came from around the corner. Powerful, I can believe, but big? Also, what's wrong with his hair? Did he come out of an anime, or what? Lith didn't slow down and set up several barriers, just in case the newcomer was hungry like all the creatures Lith had met during his explorations. /U003C wait. If you help me to get out of here, I'll reward you handsomely. /U003, said the green-haired man in a forgotten language. Seeing that Lith wasn't even listening, he charged forward with inhuman speed, shape-shifting into his real form. An emerald-scaled dragon the size of 3-story noble house started to give Lith chase, using air magic to support its gigantic wings and gain more speed. /U003C. I said wait. /U003, the creature roared while desperately trying to catch up. Lith had never seen a real dragon before. His first reaction was surprise, immediately followed by his survival instincts kicking in. How bad is our situation? He asked. Bright blue core inside the stronger body I have ever seen. Shapeshift. Lith was losing ground, so he had his hybrid form's wings emerge from his back. One of the perks of the Orichalcum Skinwalker was that it was able to revert to its liquid form at will, so even if dimensional magic was sealed inside Heriol, Lith had no need to take it off to be able of shapeshifting. The wings allowed him to go as fast as the dragon, since his much smaller figure had an easier time maneuvering along the corridors. Lith only needed to fold his wings to go through a door, whereas his alleged enemy had to revert back to human form. The Emerald Dragon was flabbergasted and overjoyed seeing a fellow dragon, so he attempted to speak in Draconic. /U003C. Wait, I mean no harm, little brother. We can get out of here together. /U003 Too bad that Draconic was a guttural tongue so filled with power that it would hurt the ears of a normal human, making them bleed. Lith took it as some kind of sonic attack and moved even faster. /U003C. I said stop. /U003 outraged by the blatant lack of respect from the lesser dragon in front of him, the Emerald Dragon breathed bright blue origin flames against Lith. Thanks, sucker. Lith replied, hurling a jet stream of origin flames of his own, which countered the enemy attack and produced a conflagration that further enhanced his speed, whereas it forced his enemy to stop. The Emerald Dragon couldn't cross the raging firestorm in front of himself without risking to die. How can a lesser dragon produce such a powerful flame? I only fired a warning shot, but he still managed to block it. Father Ligane must have become even stronger if even such a hatchling can reach that kind of skill. He thought. Lith was back to the straight path, so he could put away the map and focus only on his speed. How much until the reset? He asked. Less than 5 minutes. Solus's reply made Lith curse. That's too much time. I don't want to fight a dragon. I don't even know what they are capable of. Lith moved outside the barrier, using his army amulet to call for reinforcements. General Vorg went pale hearing about the Emerald Dragon. Good gods, him again? The strike team will be there as fast as they can. Do not engage him unless the barrier is at risk. Fighting alone would be a suicide. Lith nodded while preparing for the worst. Little did he know that the conflagration caused by the origin flames had damaged Heriol's walls, making the cursed object overseeing the city react with extreme prejudice. The Emerald Dragon was currently fighting for his life against an endless barrage of spells which prevented him from moving even 1 inch forward. Vorg and a full platoon of spellbreakers arrived less than a minute after Lith's call. They patiently waited for the enemy's arrival, casting several arrays one on top of another and using the barrier's power source to boost their spells. When the reset time arrived, the whole stone dome surrounding Heriol trembled and the Emerald Dragon was sent in a remote corner of the city. It seems we were lucky, son, said General Vorg while dispelling the arrays he was keeping at the ready. Usually when Jakra manages to get out, things go downhill fast. Is Jakra the dragon's name? Lith asked. No, that's how we call him. Her. Whatever that is. We've tried multiple times to communicate with him, but it never works. A dragon would be a powerful asset, so we've tried bringing language experts and giving him food. Yet the only thing he is interested in is getting out, so we are forced to kill him every time. We still have no idea why so many powerful creatures have been locked inside Heriol, but we cannot allow any of them to escape unless we are sure they can be trusted. In my book, whoever spews fire first and talks later is unworthy of trust. Vorg waved his staff, creating a warping array leading to the closest gate. Ranger Verhan, you'll remain here until the next reset. If by then Jakra is still trapped, then you'll resume your regular duty. Don't hesitate to call for help. After Solus confirmed Lith that they were alone, he warped to the nearest mana geyser and had her assume her tower form. He had no need to camp in the middle of nowhere when he could use the surveillance mirror on the tower's first floor to keep an eye on Heriol from a distance. I know it may sound hypocritical coming from me, but I think Vorg is too paranoid. That dragon can only escape out of pure luck. Heriol has several floors, and we never managed to fully explore even one of them in the short time between resets. Lith said, taking their most recent prizes out of his pocket dimension. Agreed, but if you look at the bright side, it's like you got a few hours leave. Solus welcomed him in her wisp form. Yeah, there are far worse ways to spend your birthday, Solus. Happy birthday. Lith confirmed on his clock that it was more or less the same hour when 13 years ago he had spoken with Solus for the first time and given her a name. Thanks, she said, brimming with joy. She only needed a shred of consciousness to stand watch with the mirror. The rest was focused on the task at hand. It was one of the most difficult things Solus had ever done, but she wanted to do it anyway. Lith, can I ask you something as a birthday present? She asked. Anything you want. Within reason, of course. Can you promise me not to get angry? The wisp rested on his shoulder, wobbling in anxiety. I can try. That much I can promise. Are you sure that's all you want for your birthday? You're making me feel like I set the bar so low for you that. The wisp left his shoulder and stopped in front of his eyes before starting to grow in size, cutting Lith short in surprise. Soon Solus was in her humanoid form, wearing a simple dress with a flower design that left her shoulders and arms exposed. Well, what do you think? She searched his neck for the vein that she knew would throb whenever he was really angry, no matter how good his poker face was. That it was about time you told me. I was really starting to feel left out. Lith said, his neck vein calm and composed. Plus, if you waited more, it would have made my birthday present kind of awkward. He handed to her one of the orichalcum hammers they had forge mastered. Its shaft was slimmer and more delicate compared to the other one. The words, Maker of Wonders, had been magically engraved of both sides of the shaft. The hammer's head featured an actual hammer on one side and a pick on the other. You knew all along? Solus felt embarrassed and frustrated at the idea of having spent so much time worrying for nothing. It wasn't that hard to guess. First, you refused to keep me company when I bathed. That happened way before I got my body, she thought. Then, you started to press me to go to sleep, or left me to spend time with Tista. Plus, there was the increase in the food expenses and the bills for clothes Tista bought, but never wore. If you consider that I knew that once the first floor of the tower would be restored you were meant to acquire your body made of light, it was almost obvious. Lith shrugged. So you're not angry? She asked. No. I know all too well the difference between sharing your secrets because you want to and because you have to. I honestly don't understand the reason why you kept it a secret from me, but I was willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. You look gorgeous in that dress, by the way. Solus brimmed with joy at those words, and so did the tower. She hugged him, feeling for the first time Lith returning the embrace. Solus then told him that the reason she hadn't told him about her new form was that she didn't want to mess up his relationship with Camilla. I just wanted you to be happy. I realized that now it's like you were living together with two women at once, and I didn't want to force you to lie to Camilla. I decided to come clean with you because I think my past could help us with your problem. Solus started to share with him all of her memories about the forge mastering method she had witnessed during her visions and how different the enchanted items she remembered of were from those they currently used. They watched the memory of her adamant hammer over and over, comparing it with the sword they had recently acquired. There was a striking resemblance between them. Maybe this Master Menadion of yours was also a teacher in an ancient academy. If I'm right and Heriol really is some kind of twisted version of the 6 great academies, maybe this sword was one of her works. Lith handed Solus both the book and the enchanted item, hoping they would trigger one of her flashbacks. Solus ran her fingers over the runes engraved in the blade. Each time she did it, They turned from blue to gold for a split second, emitting each one a different musical note. This hasn't been crafted by Master Mina Dion. Don't ask me why, but I'm sure of it. I think it might have been forge mastered using one of the techniques she shared, though. It feels so familiar to me that it can't be just a coincidence. She said, "What about the gibberish? Can you read it?" "No. What's worse, I don't recognize any of these spells. I don't think I have ever seen them before," she replied. Maybe it's because Mina Dion was an awakened too. If, like Master Silverwing, she decided to pass her knowledge on a fake magus, this is not what she would have taught you. According to your memories, you were likely to be her awakened disciple. Lith pondered. If you are right, why did she do this to me? Solus pointed at the tower and then to herself. Most powerful mages are batch T crazy. Lith didn't know what to tell her. Or maybe it was just the result of a failed experiment. The really important question is, do you really want to spend your birthday working, or do you have anything in mind? Lith asked. I actually do. Solus took a small package from a secret compartment in the walls. Happy anniversary, Lith. He destroyed the gift paper, revealing a cylindrical ring made of an alloy of gold and orichalcum, with a blue mana gem set in the middle of it. The cloaking ring. That's why you didn't rush me making one. Does it have any special abilities? Lith's orichalcum armors had proven to be better than he had planned. The adamant was able to enhance a pseudo-core in unexpected ways. Not that I'm aware of, Solus said. Lith imprinted the ring before slipping it on his right forefinger. How does my mana core look like now? Red, and your life force appears to be at human levels. Interesting. Normal cloaking items do not affect the life force. Maybe it depends on the fact that I'm wearing two at once. Let's see if it works the same for you too. Lith put the ring on Solus's right hand, but she felt her heart pounding anyway. Her light body disappeared with a pop and her dress fell to the ground. Phew. Solus's voice made the tower's wall tremble for several seconds until she managed to make her body reappear. CK? That cost me a lot of stamina. We can't check the effects on me until I return in my gauntlet form. To add insult to injury, I don't have much time left before I need to rest. Taking human form drains a lot of energy, she said. Her mood was getting worse by the second. Then revert to your wisp form. I don't want you to disappear in the middle of dinner. We've waited for too long for the moment when we could share a meal together, Lith said with a sigh. They spent the time before supper studying the unknown blade. The metal it was made of was nothing special. The mana crystals it was fused with were just cyan, and its pseudo-core was rather simple. If not for the runes, Lith wouldn't have given it a second look. I don't get what purpose can engraving runes have. There's nothing special in this blade. Its mana pathways, its mana circulatory system, and even its pseudo-core is insignificant. Maybe they have a special effect. We should try it out. Solus was out of options. She couldn't find any reason to waste time engraving runes as well. Lith reluctantly imprinted the blade with his mana. He would have preferred not doing it, because the weapon would have no market value until the moment he died. Solus created a test room, using earth magic to shape several dummies of different durability. The sword made short work of those as hard as wood, but was unable to put a dent on rocks. Lith channeled his mana through the pseudo-core and activated its effect. The pseudo-core suddenly grew in size and power, yet the mana pathways remained stable. The excess energy was drawn to the runes and spread across the entire weapon. A split second later, several air blades cut down all the remaining dummies, even the ones made of stone, before hitting the tower walls. Damn, that was unexpected. Are you alright, Solus? Yeah, don't worry. That thing is too weak to hurt me. Do you think what I think? Yes. The runes somehow compress and stabilize the pseudo-core, allowing even common iron to withstand such a powerful magical energy. Also, despite the cyan mana crystals, the spell had the same firepower that normally would require blue gemstones. Lith had determined the strength of the spell with life vision. The problem is that we have no idea how to carve them, nor if their number, kind, or position holds a special significance. Solus said, nor we know when they have to be applied. Before or after the bonding spell? Before or after the forge mastering process? He asked. Lith opened the booklet, but he couldn't decipher a single word. We need a library, an archaeologist, or both. I doubt there are many dead language experts. Most of them are likely to work for the crown. Solus said, sharing our discovery will be the last resort. If this kind of knowledge spreads, awakened ones will be able to convert it into true magic, just like us. I don't want to lose our edge on the competition. Lith put away both the sword and the booklet, searching his memory for someone trustworthy they could ask for help. Maybe and maybe not. Remember that awakened ones have a long life. This knowledge might be lost to fake mages, but it could be common among the council, or whatever it's called. The crown might actually be aware of it as well. Do you remember the insanely powerful weapons Thrud had? Or Vorga's staff? They are impossible to make, even at our current level, at least without the runes. Solus pointed out. Are you saying that I'm the only idiot who doesn't know about it? No, more like you are part of the 99% population who doesn't have access to it. Also, the book is damn old. Magic makes progress over time, so the method described might be good for you who are starting from scratch, but it's likely to be old news. Unless we evolve it into something unique by combining it with your talent for forge mastering and my abilities as a tower, of course. Solus was intrigued by the idea. Mana geysers gave them an edge that no other mage, even awakened ones, had. Lith took it less gracefully. Having spent hours exploring Huriol, risking his life, and almost facing a dragon for almost nothing made him want to scream. Almost. Fine. It's dinner time. Let's eat something, and then I'd like for us to do something I always dreamed about ever since I've seen your light body form. Lith said. Solus needed sheer willpower to not blush. Lith's dirty mind plus seeing him with his girlfriends too many times had rubbed off on her over the years. When they moved to the dining room, Solus discovered that Lith had stored a small banquet inside his pocket dimension. He had no idea what Solus liked or disliked, so he had bought a lot of stuff from his favorite restaurants. Most of them were meat dishes, but there were also vegetable soups and grilled fish. Solus ate to her heart content, brimming with joy. Usually, she could only consume food already stored in the tower, but aside from pastries and meat, Lith didn't carry much along with himself, at least not already cooked. Solus had no idea how to prepare a meal, and neither did Tista, so her eating habits until that point had been pretty repetitive. Solus lived it more like a date rather than as a birthday, having all of Lith's attention for herself. He asked her all about her new body, how it worked, how much she could feel and experience. It doesn't feel like skin, but it's soft, warm, and pleasant to the touch. He said while touching her naked arm while using invigoration on her. Lith wanted to check if there was any way to speed up her recovery process. No. Yes. Thank you. The situation was getting more awkward by the second. Solus was swallowing non-stop out of stress. When Lith started to talk about forge mastering, things went back to normal. So that's what he was talking about. Solus thought, half relieved and half disappointed when they went back to the forge lab. We are, hopefully, the only two people in the whole Mogurt who have the same mana signature. Now that you have a body, we can forge master together. Imagine what kind of items we can craft by combining our efforts. Not only do we always live, breathe, and work together, but our minds are also linked. I doubt there are many artisans who can match our mutual understanding. Lith said, being overly optimistic. It turned out that their mana was indeed compatible, but they had two completely different ways of forge mastering, and they had to learn how to adapt to each other. The problem was that Solus had to keep the magic circle, empower both hammers, and forge master, whereas Lith could focus only on shaping the pseudo-cores. On top of that, Solus could only hold her body for a few hours if she did nothing, but forge mastering exhausted her strength much more quickly. Time was an enemy she couldn't beat. With the little time we got, the best we can do is some basic stuff I have no need for anymore. Either we must make you stronger or find a way to speed up the crafting process. We could try again, but this time you step in only during the pseudo-core injection phase. Lith proposed after a few test runs. Seems like a great idea. Do you mind if we continue another day? I'm so tired that even my wisp is about to collapse. Solus was back in her wisp form, wheezing and panting. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you work even on the date of your birthday. If you didn't, I would have thought that you had been replaced by an alien shapeshifter. She chuckled. Besides, I had a lot of fun. I never feel alive like when we work together, especially on forge mastering. Next time, I keep the circle and you do the crafting. That way I can observe your method and learn how to better coordinate with you. Lith proposed after they had discovered that they couldn't use mind fusion to speed things up. Fusing their minds caused Solas's body to get assimilated as well, making it impossible for her to wield her hammer. The fusion would allow them to feel what the other felt, but also would flood their minds with each other's thoughts. Shaping a pseudo-core required surgical precision, and their conflicting approaches at crafting ended up being a distraction. As soon as the next labyrinth reset happened, and there was no trace of Jarek, Lith received a call on his army amulet. He returned back to Huriol via the warping mirror before answering. Ranger Verhan, this is Ranger Morok Erie. I supervise the Hessa region, and I'm calling you to schedule your yearly evaluation. Are you done with urgent business in Keller? Lith had never heard of other rangers, but he knew about Hessa. It was the region neighboring his own, and according to his books, it wasn't much better. Ranger Erie was a man in mid-20s, about 1.8 meters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall, so he was quite tall according to Mogur's standards. He had black hair and dark eyes. Like most rangers, he had a stubble a few days old and unkempt hair. There was no reason to keep appearances if you were alone most of the time. Yes, I've already taken care of most lost cities, and I've nothing to do except for patrolling. What do you mean, evaluation? I do regular reports, and so do those who request my help. I never heard about a further test. Lith asked. It's no standard procedure. A normal ranger has no need for a yearly evaluation, but so far you have proven to be anything but. The Army is interested in putting your abilities to test since you have only one more year left of service. If you pass, the top brass might make you a good offer to tempt you to prolong your military career. I'll be in charge during the mission you and I will undertake together. Morok said. What kind of mission requires 2 rangers at once? Lith hated teamwork. Tower warping would become impossible with a partner, and he wasn't a fan of camping in the open. The worst kind. Morok sighed. Babysitting. I beg your pardon. Some poor bastards have discovered ancient ruins inside an underground network of tunnels inside a dungeon, and a group of idiotic mages with more money than brain have organized an expedition. What does it have to do with us? Can't they pay for their private guards? Lith was getting annoyed just at the thought of such a job. In theory, yes. Ruins, however, are all considered royal properties unless a team of experts decides otherwise. The crown cannot allow for lost artifacts or knowledge to fall into the wrong hands. To make matter worse, one of those noble mages has a powerful daddy who demanded the best, and that's where we come into play. The ruins are located at the border between our turfs, and we were both graded as monsters from the army. He was graded as me? Turf? This man speaks more like a beast than a human. Solus, analysis. Lith thought. Yeah, right. Since when I can evaluate someone from his hologram? I need to see him in person. Solus replied. When and where? Lith asked, eager to finish the mission quickly. Let's meet in Letras. It has a warp gate, it's close to our destination, and their roasted pork shank is to die for. I'll wait for you at the Wild Boar Tavern. We have a few things to do before picking up the kids, so come prepared. Over and out. Lith took into account how much time it would take a normal mage to reach his destination and used all the extra time to use accumulation. One of the problems of conducting experiments was that it left him little time to refine his mana core. Luckily, a mana geyser combined with his tower allowed him to absorb world energy at a faster rate than normal. Lith's blue mana core needed enormous amounts of world energy for a single cycle of expansion and compression. Usually, I'd rush there, but I don't want to raise suspicions by moving too fast. Behind Morok's kind words there could actually be a trap. General Morn never liked me. He is likely the reason for this evaluation. He must be doubting my achievements. I bet that pompous ass is envious of how Constable Tyrus rewarded me after Xancha's events. Either it's him, or one of the enemies of Commander Barian is trying to pull a fast one. Lith thought. Lithas had no intention of serving in the military more than it was needed. He hated politics and all the struggles that taking a side would result in, but at the same time, he wouldn't allow anyone to take away his merits. The following day, Lith reached Letras. Solus was back in her ring form, wrapped around the cloaking ring she had crafted. She now appeared as nothing but a fancy stone decoration. If this Morok Erie is an awakened or an emperor beast in disguise, at least Solus is safe as long as I give him no chance of using invigoration on me. Lith thought. Letras was a trading city, and due to the winter lockdown, Dimensional magic was still banned inside its walls to prevent illegal food trades to alter the price markets. Like most of the cities of the Griffin Kingdom, it was divided into 3 areas. The outer rim was the biggest and the most populated one. It was where the commoners lived, the granaries were located, and the resting place for tired travelers like stingy rangers who wanted to save a few coins but still enjoy a decent meal and bed. During winter, moving huge loads of merchandise required wagons and draft animals, so the roads were large enough to accommodate 3 of them at once. One lane was usually reserved for civil servants tasked with removing the brown and yellow snow that would otherwise turn entire city blocks into open outhouses. The houses were 1 or 2-story high, made of stone or wood based on the owner's income. They were usually tightly packed with little to no space between them. Entire blocks consisted solely of warehouses, most of which were located near the city gates or bordered on the middle rim to facilitate the transportation of goods. The middle rim was occupied by merchants' shops, craftsmen's and artists' workshops. Only the middle class could afford a house there. They were all made of stone and at least 2-story high. There was enough space between them to have a garden or a small stable. According to the desk sergeant who welcomed Lith when he stepped out of the warp gate, the Wild Boar Tavern was located in the middle rim. The ground level consisted of a wooden floor and walls, with several hardwood tables where groups of clients could sit to order their meal. Those who came in alone would rather sit in front of the counter to enjoy the company of the barkeep, of the other customers, and be served more quickly. The room had a cozy feeling and was lighted by several chandeliers and a big popping fireplace that occupied a good quarter of the east wall. A whole pig was being roasted over the fire, spreading in the air a delicious smell that made people open up their stomach and loosen their wallet. Lith was no exception, so he ordered a plate of roasted pork and a beer to go with it even before sitting down at Moroc's table. The ranger was eating one of the tavern's famous pork shank with the appetite of a man who had been stranded for a long time and had forgotten his manners. Bright cyan core, excellent physical conditions. According to my mana sense, he shouldn't be an awakened, and based on my life sense, he is human. Solus said. The man had a lean but muscular physique. From the last time Lith had seen him, Morak had cut his hair, but the beard was still there. Except it was now dirty with gravy and the fat dripping from the meat. Please, have a seat, Morak said with a full mouth and spitting over most of the table. A powerful burp later, he cleaned his right hand over his shirt before offering it to Lith, who reluctantly shook it. If all rangers are like this guy, I now understand why we have a bad name. Lith thought. It's great to eat warm food without worrying about it getting cold or luring hungry beasts, right? Lith nodded, his appetite waning by the second. Morak noticed Lith's eyes staring at the grease stain above his heart, which had yet to completely fade. God, sorry. I almost forgot how a civilized human behaves. I've become too reliant on the self-cleaning properties of our uniform to fix my mess. I'll never be grateful enough for it. Without such a marvel, after a few weeks in the open, we'd stink so bad that the stench would kill us faster than any enemy. He laughed, making Lith glad for Solus's company and the safe haven she represented. Any question about the mission? Many. How dangerous is it supposed to be? Lith asked. Wish I know. It can go from boring as heck, where the worst thing we have to face is the whining of pampered smarty pants, to a nightmare where we have to pave our road in blood, steel, and bacon. Bacon? Lith asked, regretting the question the moment he heard himself saying it out loud. Well, yes. When push comes to shove, we might run out of supplies, and monsters are meat, after all. A man needs to eat. His words sent a shiver down Lith's spine and made him check his food supplies stored inside his pocket dimension. How are you supposed to evaluate me if nothing happens? I wish I was still such an optimist. SHT always hit the fan, kid. It's only a matter of when. If it's of any consolation, I'm not enjoying this any more than you do. As soon as winter ends, I'm going to retire. Morak replied. Retire? You're what, 25? Being a ranger, it's not an easy job. Most people quit after 2 years, for tops. I've been a ranger for 6 years now. I've done my part, and now I'm eager to convert my merits in a noble title, get me some lands, a missus, and dedicate my life to magical research. As for you, I heard you are a bounty hunter and now even a spellbreaker. This mission is the perfect task to put your abilities to the test. When exploring ruins, The real danger doesn't come from monsters or magical beasts. The real threat usually comes from the humans sitting right beside you. Suddenly, Moroc's jovial mood disappeared. He took a dramatic pause, looking at some point past Lith. He had the expression of a man who had experienced one betrayal too much and was now lost in unpleasant memories. Lith felt an odd sense of kinship toward the fellow ranger, at least until Morok stood up and said, "Man, the food here is great, but it runs through your stomach as if it warps. See you in a jiffy." Lith sighed, wondering what kind of a moron he had been paired with while pondering Morok's words. Interesting. So the army suspects that someone inside the group might be a foreign spy interested in our ruins. Lith thought. Or maybe they want to prevent an internal strife. In case of a big discovery, a lot of people might be tempted to cause an accident to take credit for it. It's not just a matter of fame or glory, but also of the reward that the crown would bestow upon the one who contributes the most. Solus suggested. After Morok returned, they went stockpiling for food and everything they could need during the following days. Once they were done with the preparations, the two rangers left Letras by flight. Our destination is the crystal mines in the Duchy of Laraxia. The rest of the expedition should arrive shortly. Noticing Litha's surprised look, Morok quickly added, "Do you remember the monster outbreak? Well, some crazy-ass goblins raided the permanent guard post that protects the mines. Normal monsters would have been easily killed, but the little bastards could fire some black rays from their hands that pierced through our defenses like they were made of paper." Lith had no idea how to call it, but he had seen chaos magic enough times to recognize it from its effects. "Our defenses? You were there?" Lith asked. "Of course I was. That's my turf, and the kingdom spends big money to protect something like a crystal mine. They are more valuable than even platinum. Their production can't stop even during winter because even magical research would be affected. Thanks to their weapons and arrays, the guards managed to hold on until my arrival, but there wasn't much even I could do. You know goblins, right? Well, they were a frigging army, each one capable of using normal magic and those black rays as well. Once I realized we had no chance against such an assault, I detonated the arrays to buy us some time and lead the survivors inside the crystal mines. We went to its deepest tunnels, and then I used earth magic to bring us even deeper. Usually doing such a thing is idiotic. Raw crystals are unstable, and earth magic could make them detonate. That's why you need specialized personnel and crystal smiths to work in the mines. Yet between a likely death and certain death, the choice was obvious. We walked for days, with only my rations to feed dozens of people, constantly on the run. Somehow, the goblins would always find us. And to make matters worse, they seemed to become better at magic over time. Long story short, we found the ruins by sheer luck. While escaping, we crossed an underground network of tunnels we weren't even aware of. At that point, our luck turned. The goblins stopped following us, and I finally had the time to wait for reinforcements. You can easily guess the rest. Morok said, "Fuck me sideways." This means that the abomination inside the goblins had enough time to completely reform and is waiting in the area, or that even such a powerful creature is scared of those ruins. Either way, this is bad. Lith thought. Solus opened all of her senses at once. Litha's dirty mind wasn't the only thing that had rubbed off on her over time. Her paranoia was now fully developed too. "Is that the moment when you consumed monster flesh?" Lith asked. "Yeah, but not the goblins. There was something off with them. Their smell, how they moved. Heck, they could even talk." When they landed, Lith casually sniffed his partner. He trusted Solus, but after the experience with the awakened assassin, he had started to consider that her senses could be fooled. Morok kept talking like a magical beast. A normal human wouldn't have the time to perceive the goblin's smell in the middle of a crisis. Yet all of his enhanced senses told him the odd ranger was human. The entrance to the mines resembled a military fort. A tall, round wall made of stone 1 meter, 3.3 feet, thick surrounded an area the size of a village. 4 guard towers stood 10 meters, 33 feet, tall, allowing the guards to notice incoming enemies from afar. Life vision showed Lith a series of arrays surrounding the fort. All the buildings within the walls were made of stone and in mint condition. At the fort's very center, there was an arch made by stone and huge wooden beams that lead to an underground passage. "Are you sure this is the place?" It's in perfect condition. I don't see any traces of the attack. Lith said, Told you. The kingdom spares no expenses for a crystal mine. Winter or not, they rebuilt it in less than a month. Then why not put a warp gate? It would allow moving reinforcements and crystals way faster than any other common means of transportation. Lith asked. Crystals are unstable. Even the number of arrays in place here is fine-tuned to not trigger a chain reaction. A warp gate would be a liability since bending space for such long distances creates ripples that might make the crystals explode. That even if there was no array, and defense takes precedence. Morok took several rectangular wooden rods out of one of his dimensional amulets. The rods were about 2 meters, 6.5 feet, long and 3 centimeters, 1.8 inches, thick. Each of their 4 sides was covered with bright red runes, pulsing with power. Lith immediately recognized those rods. They were the same the late Captain Vallegros used to build a temporary waypoint near Candria. Back then Lith knew nothing about runes and advanced forge mastery, so neither Solus nor him paid the enchanted item any attention. Now that they had discovered about the importance of the runes, it took them quite an effort to not stare dumbly at them. By my maker, each of these things holds only part of the pseudo-core. The runes are even more amazing than we thought. They can even allow a magical item to be disassembled and assembled at will. Solus thought. Also, why red runes? Are they different from the blue ones, or what? Lith wondered. First time seeing one of these? Morok asked after noticing Lith's surprise. Second time, actually. Do you have any idea why these things have runes on them? Aside from communication amulets, I've never seen them on an enchanted item, and I'm a forge master. Lucky you. I spend a fortune every time I need to upgrade my equipment. Honestly, I have no clue. Maybe just like the runes on an amulet mark their owner. These runes are related to the coordinates they are locked on. Morok shrugged and started to move away from the mines. I wish these things weren't so delicate. It's hard to assemble them when you are under siege, but the worst part is that they can be used only once and are linked to a specific location. Even if I had one back then, I couldn't have used it to escape because without a proper structure, the dimensional ripples a gate generates would have blown up the mines and killed us all. He sighed. Lith helped Morok to assemble the beams, forming with them a circle on the ground. Solus could see that each time a beam was correctly positioned, the pseudo-core fragments would assemble. The slightest mistake would make them clash, and the beams would disconnect, releasing sparks. When they were done, the Rangers had to inject mana into it. It took them time and effort, but after several minutes, a warp gate materialized above the circle. What did I tell you? Spoiled rich kids are the worst. We had to fly here and do all the hard work so that they don't break a sweat. Lazy bastards. Morok said. Lith was more interested in sharing Solus's mana sense and studying how the runes interacted with the gate rather than listening to Morok's ramblings. Normal enchanted items couldn't hold spells like flight, healing, or warp steps because they required their casters' will to work properly. A mage could only infuse such spells inside his own magical rings, which was one of the reasons that made even Tier 3 rings expensive and Tier 4 ones prohibitive for most mages. The pathway, instead, was able to overcome such limitations thanks to the runes. They enveloped the pseudo-core, bearing the will of its creator and channeling all the accumulated energy in the beams to connect to a warp gate. The dimensional corridor was big enough to allow several people to cross it together. Those walking through the gate were all members of research teams from all the 6 great academies, each one wearing their distinctive uniform. The clearing was quickly filled with a rainbow-colored mass of people. Chapter 628. What the heck? Are we really supposed to take care of so many people with just the 2 of us? Lith couldn't believe his own eyes. There were already 10 people, and more kept stepping out of the dimensional gate. Of course not. Morok replied. Each one of these bastards would gladly cut their best friend's throat if it meant getting more funds and recognition. I'm here to guide them to destination, and you are here as a contingency measure. For everything else, there's the army. Morok's words garnered him a lot of attention, mostly of the bad kind. What he had said was true yet incredibly rude. He was speaking of esteemed mage professors and researchers as they were just common thugs. Lith recognized the uniforms from the black, white, lightning, and fire griffin, whereas it was his first time seeing people from the crystal and earth griffin. Ranger Verhen. A young woman greeted Lith by giving him a big hug. Dad really has done it. He made you come here with the excuse of the evaluation. What the heck do you mean with that, Quilla? Lith's paranoia had made him see countless shadows and conspiracies on his path, yet the truth had turned out to be beyond his wildest expectation. I told you that there's no one I trust enough to watch my back while on the field. Since you never got the time to accompany me, I had no qualms exploiting my family's influence to get you assigned here. Don't worry, miss. Us Rangers are always glad to help hot women, Warlock said with his arms open, expecting to receive the same treatment. I'm sorry, I don't hug unknown creeps. Quilla replied with a straight face, before letting Lith go. The scene was drawing too many gazes. Lith went to greet the white griffin professor who had brought Quilla along as her assistant when the Real bodyguards stepped through the gate. It was a 5-man unit, donning deep green uniforms that identified them as members of an elite troop. Their clothes granted them protection on par with that of a ranger, but they also wore enchanted arm, legs, and shoulder guards that increased their defense to the level of a professor's uniform. Each one of them had at least a cyan core and excellent physical condition. Their weapons were nothing much, though. They all held the same pseudo-cores, giving them several versatile abilities rather than few but powerful ones. The only exception was their captain. All of her equipment was custom-made and on par with Lith's gatekeeper, if not even better. Lith, what are you doing in the Hesse region? Floria asked. She now had very short hair that resembled a pixie cut. It made her look even more tomboyish than usual. It's nice to meet you too, Floria. How are you doing? Lith was happy not being the rude one for once. Pretty well, thanks. I volunteered for this mission to make sure that nothing bad happens to her. I was expecting to meet another ranger, so you'll excuse my surprise, she said while pointing at Quilla. I'm your man. Warlock offered his hand to her. Ranger Eerie, at your service. Now that we are all here, let's not waste any more time. We need to fly to the mines, and then it takes a long walk to reach our destination. Since we're babysitting academics, it might take us days to get to the ruins. Floria's soldiers repressed a chuckle, while the professors and their assistants threw at the ranger more gazes filled with contempt. Warlock collected the wooden bars forming the temporary gate before leading the group to the mines. Is it really necessary to have a guide? We could have found the ruins on our own. A middle-aged professor from the Crystal Griffin asked to Floria after they landed. He had blue eyes, white hair, and a beard. Good luck with that, Warlock chimed in. I closed the passages as fast as I created them to make it harder for the goblins to follow us. The only traces left are those of the tunnels opened by the goblins, but most of them have collapsed during the chase or shortly after. The little bastards only cared about catching us, and they made quite a few crystals explode in the process. I'm the only one who can find the way, so shut up and follow me. After checking their identities, the guards residing inside the fort let the expedition team in. Despite the incident with the monsters, the mines were already fully operational. Carts full of crystals were being unloaded near the entrance before being sent back. Litha's group was comprised of 12 experts, 1 professor and 1 assistant from each academy, Floria's 5-man unit, and Warlock. The mines had ample corridors, but not big enough to accommodate 19 people while workers and crystal smiths did their job. Even though they moved slowly, by the time the group reached the lowest levels, the people from the academy were exhausted. The professors were all experts in their fields with decades of experience, which meant they were quite old and more used to sit behind a desk rather than walk on rough terrain. Their assistants were younger than them, but equally out of shape. None of them was warrior material. Girl, you may be pretty, but if you start getting a fat ass at your age, it will be hard keeping your boyfriend. You need to exercise a little, Warlock said to Quilla. He had yet to break a sweat, and had only compassion for a young woman who wheezed like one of the old fossils. Lith is not my boyfriend, she angrily replied. I know. I'm talking about the captain guy. He clearly fancies you if he's risking his ass for your safety. You could at least. Floria is my sister. Her voice became stone cold, her eyes brimming with rage and fatigue. Oh, sorry. I just heard a noise coming from that way, Warlock said, pointing his finger in a random direction. We'll resume this conversation never. Warlock moved quickly and silently like the wind, reaching the position of the make-believe threat under the baffled gazes of the soldiers he met along the way. Did you hear that too? Lith emerged from a shadow, pointing at the only tunnel that, despite the many mana crystals coming out of its walls and the artificial lights, was poorly lit. I sure did. I mean, that thing is a woman. Morok's voice was still shaken by the revelation. Not that. That. A small clunk made the hair on both rangers' necks stand up. They waited in silence, ignoring the noises coming from the distant miners and the nearby academics. A clunk, followed by another. Lith used life vision, but the mana crystals inside and outside the walls messed up his perception. He could have sworn there were life signatures among the crystals. Solas's mana sense didn't fare much better, so she stopped focusing on the details and looked at the corridor's bigger picture. There's a distortion in the mana along the right wall, she said. The moment Litha's gaze followed her directions, he could notice that the distortion had a humanoid form. It seems that hiding any further is pointless, a raspy, feminine voice said. A snap of her fingers made the tunnel they had come from be sealed by a stone wall, while the entire zone was silenced. Not even the guards near the collapsing tunnel noticed that something was wrong until a volley of chaos arrows came flying their way. Chapter 629. Korg, the eldritch abomination whose fragments had been implanted inside the goblin tribe, still believed to have drawn the short end of the stick by being bonded to such useless and ugly creatures. On the contrary, she had been quite lucky. The goblins' only strong point was their reproductive ability, so she had an easy time manipulating them at first, and then overpowering their feeble minds once she had grown stronger. Assaulting the crystal mine had given her plenty of time and energy to refine a body similar to the original eldritch she had been spawned from. Unlike the other hybrids, she didn't give chase to her mother due to her vessel's weakness. She had preferred to remain hidden inside the mines all along to build her strength and regain her knowledge. Korg had no trouble avoiding the miners. There were too many unused corridors she could use as havens, and as long as she didn't suck the crystals dry, they would always recover their energy. She was one of the few hybrids still alive in the entire Garland continent. Most of the others had been killed by humans or emperor beasts before reaching their maturity or assimilated by their originals after challenging them. The noise that Lith had heard and Morok pretended to was her slowly digging out a particularly juicy mana crystal to feed upon without being noticed. She had no idea how the humans had found her. Her light manipulation abilities rendered Korg almost invisible, and with all the noise echoing through the tunnels, she was as silent as a mouse. Korg wasn't worried, though. Those guys weren't miners. Their disappearance was likely to go unnoticed for days, if not ever. Lith cursed his bad luck as several darts from a Tier 1 Chaos spell threatened his life. There wasn't enough space to dodge them, and he knew from experience that most barriers would be useless against Chaos magic. Lith and Morok blinked in opposite directions in the nick of time. Holes several centimeters deep opened in the wall behind where their vitals had been just a second ago. Korg couldn't use powerful spells without risking to trigger a chain reaction that would make the mine collapse, killing both herself and the humans in the process. Luckily, the Rangers had the same problem, plus they had to take care of the dead weight. Many professors were caught by surprise and remained severely injured. The same happened to their assistants and the soldiers tasked to protect them. The only silver lining was that their enchanted armors had prevented any deadly wound, and that Korg was focused on the Rangers. How bad it is? Lith asked while taking the gatekeeper out of his pocket dimension and shrinking it to the size of a short sword. She's magically stronger than you, but her physical strength sucks. Half of her body is still that of a goblin. Solus replied. Korg's appearance was that of a humanoid creature, about 1.6 meters, 5 feet 3 inches tall, with thin limbs and a head too big for her body. Half of her skin was a yellow so pale to almost be translucent, allowing to see what little of her organs still remained. The other half was a pitch-black gelatinous substance that seemed to constantly move and change its shape like it was a flowing liquid. One second it resembled the slimy skin of a toad. The next one, it was full of hair like that of a beast. Let me guess. The black half is a tough client. Lith thought. Solus telepathically nodded while turning into her glove form. The last hybrid they had fought was capable of accessing to strong equipment. In presence of so many witnesses, Lith needed a decent excuse for his awakened skills. Her glove form with its 2 mana crystals shining on the back of the hand fit the bill. She had even changed its design, to give it a more complex look that resembled the artifacts they had seen in the past. Korg sneered when she saw Lith charging forward. The two rangers were the only one unscathed from her sneak attack, so she had been afraid that they might blink away and call for help. Yet at least one of them was saving her the time of a boring chase. She welcomed Litha's arrival with another volley of chaos arrows. The distance was now too short, even for blinking, and the magic missiles were so fast to be almost invisible. Lith had gambled on his enhanced speed further boosted by air fusion, hoping it would allow him to reach his opponent before she could cast even more powerful spells, and lost the bet. Korg had started to weave her spells from the moment the two rangers had stared in her direction. Also, she held numerous advantages. By being near a wall filled with protruding crystals, she prevented her enemies from using magic against her, since the slightest mistake would make the mines collapse and kill hundreds. Plus, her position blocked blink, leaving physical attacks as the only mean to harm her. Korg expected to see Lith fall, his body riddled with more holes than Swiss cheese, so she was quite shocked when the impact didn't even slow him down. Instead of open wounds, his chest was filled with what looked like a molten silvery liquid deformed from the impact that was quickly fixing the damage it had received. Another one of the unexpected abilities derived from using orichalcum to forge master a skinwalker armor was that, by injecting it with mana, it was possible to amplify both its hardness and its repulsive energy field. Before charging, Lith had covered himself with mana from head to toes, just in case. The mana expenditure to withstand chaos magic had been enormous, but it still beat instant death. Lith performed an upward diagonal slash from right to left, forcing Korg to move from her safe spot to not be cut in half. She ducked while sidestepping on Litha's left, her eyes fixated on the blade infused with darkness magic that passed millimeters away from her face and cut off the extremity of her pointed ears. She had yet to perceive the pain from the injury when Litha's left fist struck her side, one of the parts of her body which still belonged to the goblins, with enough strength to lift her from the ground and made her spit out a mouthful of blood. She ignored the pain, grabbing his wrist to cut it open with her claws, only to discover his whole arm was covered by the silvery liquid, turning it into an orichalcum living hammer. Cunning bastard. The sword was just a distraction to hit my weak spot. If he thinks an armor can protect him from my touch, he's in for a surprise. She thought as her grip turned into a vice, sucking his vitality through the enchanted protection. Unfortunately for Korg, she wasn't Litha's first abomination. Under the silver, there wasn't the pink, frail skin of a human, but the black, scaly body of a hybrid. Both of them had the ability to prey on the vitality of their opponent, and even if Korg was more skilled, Litha's counterflow made hers a hollow victory. The stolen vitality was so scarce that it was barely noticeable. Lith was unable to free his left hand, so he lunged with the gatekeeper at Korg's shoulder, which was still made of goblin flesh. Chapter 630. She intercepted the blade with her open palm, letting it pierce through her hand until her fingers closed onto its hilt. Beating an eldritch in a contest of strength, it's a foolish quest. The only question is which one of you will break first, if you or your blade. Korg sneered. Lith inwardly cursed as her black blood corroded the gatekeeper's surface and dripped onto the mana crystals embedded in its hilt. Of all the creatures he had faced, Lith had never met one with acid for blood. Lith tried to pull the blade away, but Korg was too strong. At the same time, she tried to break his arm, but between his mana boosting the skinwalker armor and earth fusion boosting his enhanced physique, it felt to her like moving a mountain. What do you think I'm here for? Morok said from behind her a split second after one of his short swords pierced her chest and another her head. Korg had forgotten about the other ranger and that by not having her back against the wall anymore, Blink was a significant threat. By the gods, Morok was shocked seeing that the creature wasn't dying whereas his blades were melting. No vitals. Go for the yellow parts, Lith said while exploiting Korg's indecision to let go of the gatekeeper and struck with Solas's gauntlet at Korg's goblin sternum. Solas had infused herself with all the elements and released a few spells she kept at the ready at the moment of the impact. The resulting effect of the combined attack of Lith, Skinwalker, and Solas was akin to a jackhammer on the snow. The fist pierced through her chest and came out of her back, spraying red, harmless blood all over Morok. Copy that. he replied, starting to stab at the exposed goblin parts so fast that before a wound had enough time to bleed, for more had been opened. Korg inwardly cursed, trying to find a way out. Hitting her goblin body couldn't kill her since she had no vitals, but the wounds were making her strength plummet. Lith kept hammering her body with his free hand, and when she tried to move him aside with both her hands to escape from Morok's onslaught, Lith grabbed the gatekeeper's hilt. He flooded it with all the mana he could spare, infusing it with darkness magic as he twisted and pulled the blade away. Black blood hit the spot Lith had been until a split second before, making the rocks sizzle while they melted. Feeling her life slipping, Korg didn't hesitate to blinking to one of the upper levels of the mines. She kept blinking until she reached the surface, choosing a crystal deposit as her hiding spot. The crystals will help me recover my strength and shield me from an awakened life vision. I can only hope no one enters the deposit before I'm able to fight back, otherwise I'm screwed. She thought while feeding off the nearby crates. Where did she go? Lith asked Solus while looking around. The crystals surrounding them were jamming his life vision, making it hard for him to even see Morok's energy signature. She might have gone anywhere. The mines are a maze, and there are too many interferences. She replied, "That thing was a woman too. Weirdest day ever." Morok replied while using quick flicks of his wrists to clean his blades from the black blood. "I don't think she will be back anytime soon. By combining our attacks, we have given her ugly as a solid kicking. How's your weapon?" Lith stuck his back against the wall to prevent being stabbed in the back while using invigoration on the gatekeeper. The massive flow of darkness magic had already destroyed any trace of the abomination's acid. It was only a matter of assessing the damage. No, was all Lith said. The corroded metal wasn't an issue, but the damaged mana crystals were another story. Too much black blood had soaked them for too long. The pseudo-core had already spent most of its energy to regenerate the damages as fast as it could, but Lith's last darkness burst had been the final straw that broke the camel's back. The gatekeeper was already in critical condition. If he didn't retrieve it, it would have been destroyed, but to do it Lith had been forced to push it beyond its limits. Lith drew a Forge Master repairing circle so fast that even the professors watching at the process couldn't believe their own eyes. He fought with all of his skill, using his mana as a life support system, but the gatekeeper's pseudo-core slowly faded as the corruption caused by the black blood destroyed its mana circulatory system. "It's dead," Lith said after a while. The magic was gone, and the crystals had turned dull. The piece of metal in his hands was nothing but scrap. The memories of the enemies they had vanquished together, of all the times it had saved his life, flooded Lith's mind. For a moment, he grieved the gatekeeper like it was a lifelong friend. Then he started to worry about his immediate future. "Sorry to hear that, man. Hope you have another to spare. Losing your main weapon before even starting a mission is the worst that could happen." Morok was honestly sad. He knew all too well how expensive good equipment was. "Floria, Quilla, are you all right?" Lith blurted out as soon as the word dead escaped from his lips. In his battle frenzy, he had completely forgotten about his two real friends. Replacing the gatekeeper would be hard, but feasible. Lith knew that sooner or later he had to upgrade his weapon. A living being, however, couldn't be replaced. The image of Uriel appeared in his mind as life vision was focused to spot the only two life forces that held any significance to him in that tunnel. "I'm okay," Quilla said. Her voice was feeble from fatigue. "I was staring at the Rude Ranger, so I had all the time to drop down the moment I heard the voice." Floria wasn't so lucky, though. More than half of the expedition team was laying on the ground in a puddle of their own blood. The chaos arrows couldn't pierce through the magical protections, but they could still smash bones and rupture organs. Following her duty as a mage knight, Floria had pushed those who were near to her to safety while conjuring a protective shield for herself. Unfortunately, she had never met an abomination capable of using chaos magic. Her spell had been ripped to shreds, and she had taken the full force of many arrows at once. If not for all the enchantments Orion had imbued her equipment with, she would have died on the spot. "How is she?" Lith asked while placing a hand on Floria's shoulder to check her condition with invigoration. "Aren't you a healer?" "The captain is already being treated. You should take care of the wounded," said a woman in her late 50s donning the colors of the Black Griffin. She had been hit on a shoulder, but her assistant was in critical condition. Chapter 631. It's none of my business. Lith replied. Floria's recovery was slow because she had suffered extensive damage, and because of her fatigue, Quilla hadn't much life force to spare. Floria had several broken bones, punctured organs, and was bleeding out of her head, mouth, and nostrils. She was deadly pale, gurgling more blood with each breath she took. I already risked my life to protect you guys from that thing at great personal cost. I will not waste my mana on a stranger when the life of another of my friends is on the line. He started to support Quilla's spell, stopping Floria's internal bleeding before it was too late. He could have fixed her in the blink of an eye, but with Quilla monitoring Floria's condition, he had to pretend to be a normal mage, incapable of recovering his full strength with just a few deep breaths. Great Mage Verhen. The duty of all the members of the army is to protect life without giving preferential treatments. The woman from the Black Griffin was seething with anger. Her shoulder-length gray hair was dancing in the air due to the mana exuding from her body, and her eyes were reduced to 2 fiery slits. Yet she was holding her left arm in pain. The healing spell from her magic ring would take a while to heal her completely, and until that happened, she was unable to cast spells. Fake mages needed both arms and magic words to use magic. The captain performed her duty honorably, and with your actions, you are wasting her sacrifice. You should. Talking about Floria as if she was already dead made Lith snap. His right forefinger whipped as a scorpion's tail, releasing a small air bullet that struck the injured shoulder right where it would hurt the most. With his innate skill for death blows and extensive knowledge of the human body, Lith didn't even need to use life vision to find the right spot. The bullet was weak, barely as strong as a push, yet enough to rattle the bone fragments inside the professor's body like it was a flesh maraca. It caused her a pain so intense that the woman fainted without emitting a sound. That's why I hate academics, Morok said while treating the assistant from the Black Griffin. Healing wasn't a specialization he had learned back when he was a student at the Crystal Griffin, but after becoming a ranger, he had quickly understood how dangerous it was not being able to treat all kinds of wounds. It had taken him some time, but the army had provided him with all he needed to become an excellent healer. You think you are so much better than us because of your knowledge, yet when shit happens, you're as useful as a third nostril. Just because we chose to wear a uniform, it doesn't make us expendable. Instead of running your mouths for whining, help yourselves. Our lives aren't any less important than yours. Quilla felt the sting of those words as well. After leaving the academy, she had neglected physical training, thinking that always being either at her home or at the White Griffin made it unnecessary. What good is a healer that gets exhausted after a long walk? Lith has walked as much as I did, fought for his life, and yet he still has enough energy to help Floria. I'm no different from that old hag. I'm too dependent on others in times of crisis, she thought. Once Floria's condition was stabilized, Lith helped the others. Every one of those present was able to use Tier 3 healing magic and had plenty of potions, so only a handful of people were still injured. When the healers were done, the group in the tunnel looked like war survivors. Their clothes were damaged, their bodies weakened from either performing or receiving the healing, making their breath ragged and irregular. Except for Lith, who thanks to invigoration was still at his peak condition. What kind of monster are you? How the heck did you survive those black rays? Morok was proud of his stamina, yet after sharing his life force with the wounded, he wasn't faring any better than one of the old fossils. He would gladly take a few hours long nap, if given the chance. Or a calcum. Lith replied. I recently forge mastered a skinwalker armor out of it. The results are way better than I expected. What? That's impossible, Morok said, quickly followed by a few experts. I'm no forge master, but when I commissioned one, I was told that the spell reacts erratically with metals. That's why skinwalkers are always made out of clothes. Believe what you want. The important thing now is getting out of here. The abomination might return, and with the crystals surrounding us, we can't set a proper defensive perimeter nor use spells for self-defense. Must I remind you that I've lost my weapon? Lith was eager to change the topic. Back when he didn't find a metal skinwalker on the army's catalog, nor on the association's one, he had simply thought that just like many items of his interest, they were hidden to the public and reserved for the elites. His objective had always been to copy and improve the best artifacts money could buy, so he had never stopped considering that there could be a different explanation. Opening the collapsed corridor is too dangerous. We must warp to the outside. A panicked youth from the Lightning Griffin tried to cast the dimensional spell, but his master slapped him, interrupting his cast. Don't panic, you idiot. The Rangers could blink because the dimensional rift it creates is weak and lasts for a split second. If you open a dimensional corridor, we might all die. Even if the warp steps had never been completed, some of the crystals protruding from the walls started to tremble madly, resonating with the huge amount of released mana. Everyone stopped what they were doing, even breathing. After a few seconds, everything went back to normal. I agree with Ranger Verhen on the matter. Morok said out loud, for everyone to listen. I would like to rest too, but this position is a defensive nightmare. Those who can walk will walk. The others should use a float spell and let themselves be dragged. If any of you wants to back down, I've already alerted the mine's supervisor. Wait here, and someone will open the passage in a few hours. A lot of moans and groans could be heard. Almost all the mages chose to float, and it was up to the soldiers to bring them along like balloons filled with helium. Morok took point, while Lith covered their back, walking alongside Floria and Quilla. Thanks, Lith. They were both able to walk after he had given them a bit of his life force. I'm really sorry about your sword. I know how much you loved it. Do you have a replacement? Floria asked. I have a lot of weapons with me, but they all suck. All my attempts to craft a better gatekeeper failed. I guess I'd have to ask Orion for something better once we get out of here. He sighed. Did you really try to improve my father's work without even knowing the manufacturing process? That's bold. If Dad learns about it, he would be royally pissed by your attempts at stealing his secrets. She chuckled. Chapter 632. I think he will be more pissed off by you almost dying due to your bravado. There's no defense against those black rays. Your shields are no safer than wet paper against them. What the heck were you thinking? Seeing Floria almost die had triggered his memories about Carl. Both Quilla and Floria were surprised by his aggressive remarks, but only because neither of them had ever faced a fully formed abomination. Only after Lith explained to them what they were capable of, did the girls realize how big of a bullet they had just dodged. Even if I knew all this, I wouldn't have acted any differently. Floria said, My aim is to become a member of the Knights Guard, the elite of the elite for Mage Knights. If we don't protect our assigned marks, we're useless. What just happened is an occupational hazard. Lith would have liked to scold Floria for her nonsensical behavior, but in the end, he decided against it. He too had risked dying many times to follow his own agenda. Criticizing her for doing the same would have been plain hypocritical. Soon Morok started to open new tunnels with earth magic. Seeing how fast and confident he was while taking several apparently random turns, made Lith curious. How can you be so sure this is the right way? Do you have a map or something? He asked via the army amulet. No, I just marked the walls on my passage to react to my mana, in case I got lost or I needed to backtrack. That's why only I can lead the expedition. Don't you do the same in dungeons or underground places when there is no time to draw a map? Morok replied, No, I have a great memory. To be exact, Solus did. In emergency situations, Lith would rely on her abilities to access to his memories and find the right path. Otherwise, he would always take his time to draw a map and store it inside Soluspedia to gain tactical awareness in the case an ambush occurred. Like he was doing at that moment. Morok had tasked him to close the tunnels as soon as possible so that no one could follow them without being noticed. Earth magic produced a lot of noise, and with the echo in the tunnels, its use could be heard from hundreds of meters of distance. The expedition team managed to move forward for 2 more hours before even Morok was on the verge of collapsing due to exhaustion. Their advance had slowed down even further due to the lack of lighting since they had left the mines. The natural tunnels were bumpy and uneven. Their footing was also very precarious because the humidity would condense on the ground, making it slippery. Luckily for them, during his first passage, Morok had marked safe rest spots. You take the first watch, Morok said while pointing at Lith. Then have someone relieve you after 1 hour, I don't care who. I'll take the last watch. We're not moving from here before 4 hours minimum. Before any of the soldiers could complain that he wasn't their commanding officer, Morok was already asleep. His behavior caused many grumbles, but they didn't last long. Everyone was so tired that they fell asleep the moment they sat down. Lith checked his surroundings with life vision. The light coming from the crystal mines was far enough to allow him to scout far and wide, making sure that there was no imminent threat. He even performed a life detection array to cover more ground. Forge Master, Healer, Fighter, and even Warden? A voice asked. Lith recognized the woman from the Black Griffin. He was expecting some snarky remarks, or even that she would attempt to report to his commanding officer the assault she had suffered by Lith's hand. Not that Lith was afraid of either possibility. He was used to being insulted ever since he had stepped inside the White Griffin Academy. Powerful people hated the idea of witnessing the growth of someone that could become more powerful than them. Their natural response was to nip people like Lith in the bud at any cost. As for the latter possibility, Lith would have loved to see Journey discuss with someone that had dared to suggest letting her daughter die. I'm sure it would be something so slow and gruesome that I could learn a lot. I'd like to think of myself as a master of coercion, but compared to Journey, I'm just a learner. He thought. Everything that's needed for survival has to be learned. Lith replied. Wise words for someone so prone to violence. Her voice was calm. She wasn't trying to insult him, only stating a fact. Without strength, wisdom is nothing but hot air. Without wisdom, strength is just violence. I was only protecting someone who I hold dear. If you expect an apology from me, don't hold your breath. Lith replied. Quite the contrary. I've come to apologize for my earlier behavior. My assistant is like a son to me. I couldn't stand watching him die while I was helpless because of my wound. I was angry at myself and I took it out on you. She gave Lith a small bow. Take these as a sign of my goodwill. She handed Lith several mana cyan crystals, each one with a flat bottom and as big as a beer bottle. Thanks, but what am I supposed to do with them, Professor? Lith was very confused. He had a lot on his mind, from the loss of the gatekeeper to almost watching Floria die. His brain was about to pop. Yandramafale, Black Griffin's professor of history of magic and forge mastering. You can use them to set a barrier. I'm too weak to cast a spell, but at least I can give you some help. She replied with a kind smile. Seeing that Lith wasn't moving, Yandra laughed and showed him how to perform the Silent Shroud array. When Lith was done, a black dome surrounded the camp, preventing both light and sound from spreading outside of its premises. Now no one can see or hear us. The barrier it produces is not very strong, but as you can see, it's a very useful formation. Thanks to the array, Lith could see the area surrounding them as if he was wearing thermal goggles. It was quite useless for someone capable of using life and fire vision, but it would allow him to rest more easily when others would relieve him from guard duty. Thank you very much, Lith said while copying the spell in his grimoire along with his thoughts about how to turn it into true magic. Don't mention it. By protecting you, I'm protecting myself. I'd like to talk about many things with someone as peculiar as you are, but alas, I'm beat. See you later. Yandra checked on her assistant condition, and after she made sure he was just fatigued as she was, she fell asleep. Lith followed her example and went checking on his friends. Morok didn't seem to need his help, and judging by his snoring, he was having a good time. Quilla and Floria were both sleeping. Invigoration confirmed to him that there was nothing wrong with them. Since there was no point in waking them up, Lith started to circle around the edges of the formation while using accumulation. The tunnel was quiet. There was no noise nor energy signature coming towards them, yet the space around them was far from being empty. Chapter 6:33. Under the crystal mines, he could see a flow of world energy so big that it made mana geysers look like drinking fountains. There were also life forces inside the ground, the kind of which he had never seen before. He couldn't notice any of it earlier because he was in the middle of the raging storm that was Mogur's essence. It was also the reason he had been unable to chase Korg. Only now that Lith was far enough could he glimpse the magnitude of the natural phenomenon that gave life to mana crystals. Does the life force belong to awakened crystals or to Mogur itself? Thank heavens we left the mines. Being exposed for long to such a vigorous flow of world energy might speed up Floria's awakening process. It would be a shame if I had to kill the entire expedition to protect our secret. Yandra and Morok seem to be nice people, but seem is not enough too. Who are you planning to kill? Floria's voice took him by surprise and made Lith flinch. No one. What are you doing here? You should be sleeping. I don't believe you. Your eyes were ablaze, and you were making the face. She shook her head. What face? Lith asked. Your battle face. When you look at people as nothing but corpses to dissect. You know, it hurts thinking that when we first met, You looked at me that way. If I knew what it meant back then, I would have never asked you out. Floria chuckled. Do you mind company while you stand guard? I think I'm still tense from the ambush and I can't fall asleep, no matter how hard I try. I must have given her too much life force. Lith pondered. I've no such face. He lied through his teeth, making her giggle. And these eyes are not because I'm angry. I call this life vision. It allows to those like me to gauge our opponent's strength and to see even through walls. He said while using a quick hush to prevent others from hearing him. Seeing that Floria had become beet red and was covering her chest and nether regions with her arms, Lith rushed to explain. It came out wrong. I don't mean I can see through clothes or something. I see people as featureless lumps of energy. I can't even tell a man from a woman unless they're very close. Really? Do I have your word? Her arms didn't move an inch. Yes, I swear on my family. Am I making my perverted face? He said while looking straight at her body. According to Camilla, he had that one too. Definitely not. Floria relaxed as the realization he actually had a perverted face stung at Litha's pride. Why are you telling me this now? Floria asked. Because there are a lot of things down here, and I don't know if they are friendly or hostile. You already know enough about me, and I need your trust so that the next time something happens, you'll do as I say. Lith also wanted to check how much he could reveal about himself without shocking someone he cared for. Who among my men is the strongest? Floria asked, curious to put his ability to the test. Physically, the small guy with red hair. Magically, the woman sleeping near the people from the Earth Griffin. You're correct. Helion has an uncanny constitution, and Jurth is the only one in the team who got into one of the great academies. Wait, what do you mean those like me? She knew about the hush zone, but she still lowered her voice until it was barely audible. There are others? Yes, Nalier was one of them. Why do you think she only kidnapped me? She was afraid that I could mess with her plan, and she was right. Suddenly, many things started to make sense to Floria. Why both Lith and Nalier could emit an aura without the use of spells. How he had been able to notice the slave items despite they all had a different shape. The revelation was quite a big shock, so she needed to sit down for a minute. Could she shapeshift too? No. As far as I know, only Emperor beasts and I can shapeshift. Undead too. He said after a while. Are you a human or an Emperor beast? The shock in her eyes was growing stronger, but Floria was just surprised. Not scared. I wish I knew. My parents are humans, and so are my siblings. As for me, I'm me. I can't give you a better answer, sorry. Floria stood up, never averting his gaze. She couldn't stop asking herself how she looked through those blazing eyes. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question? Lith said, grateful that she wasn't prying further. Not at all. What in the gods' names did you do with your hair? It was so. His hand moved towards where the soft mass once was, before stopping midway. And now is so. There was no way to express his disappointment without being rude. Floria's hair had always been a delight for his touch and his nose. After losing the gatekeeper, seeing her with the pixie cut was like one blow too many. Men are idiots. You've lost your blade. I almost died. You opened to me 4 years late. And your biggest worry while we are stranded hundreds of meters below the ground, guided by the rudest man I've ever met. It's the length of my hair. She was laughing heartily, bringing back for both of them many happy memories. I didn't do anything to it. My hair is alive and kicking. Floria grabbed a small silver hairpin in the back of her head and took it off. A cascade of waist-long hair fell down from her head, giving Floria back the appearance she had at Journey's birthday party. I cut them once I joined the army, but I got permission to grow them back once I became an officer. My mother too nagged at me for my looks, so I asked Dad for help. Long hair might be nice to look at, but for a fighter is nothing but a nuisance. So he did this for me. The moment she put the hairpin back, her hair rolled up like a shutter while it was compressed, as if it was vacuum-packed. Can I see it? Litha's Forge Master curiosity was piqued. The hairpin turned out to be a mix of dimensional, air, and light magic. It was the most complex, useless pseudo-core Lith had ever seen. Son of a gun. Lith thought as invigoration revealed several little runes covering the hairpin. Not only was Solus right about the kingdom knowing about the runes, but also that Big Oaf used so many resources for his daughter's hair and made my gatekeeper so frail. He was quite pissed off by Orion's double standards. First, unless we're talking about people, I'm always right. Second, hello Kettle. My name is Pod, and you are black. Solus replied. As if mentioning his name was akin to a summoning ritual, Orion's rune lighted on Litha's communication amulet, drawing his attention. Is Journey okay? Did something happen to Freya? Lith asked before Orion could even utter a word. There was no other reason he could think of to explain the call. On the rare occasions they had talked to each other, it had always happened in person. Chapter 634. What the heck are you rambling about? Do you think that if something like that had happened to them, I would be wasting my time on social calls? I would be hunting Manohar's ass down while one of my men seeks your help. I'm calling you because of an outrageous rumor I heard a few hours before. Some of my Forge Master colleagues in the expedition say that you claim to have crafted an orichalcum skinwalker armor. At first, I paid it no heed, but when I called my little flower to hear about her mission, she confirmed it. Is it really true? I need to hear it from your voice. Orion said. Lith furrowed his brows while looking at Floria, who just shrugged. The cat was already out of the bag. There was no point in denying it. She said, hurting Orion's feelings. The idea that one of his daughters could keep secrets from him was terrible. Yet Floria had never shared with anyone Litha's secrets, just as Freya never talked about Protector's ability to shapeshift into a human. Yes, it's true. Lith injected a bit of his mana into the skinwalker, making it turn into a quicksilver-like liquid that covered him from head to toes and made him resemble a humanoid metal golem. Amazing. That's supposed to be impossible. The Thunderbird's feather and the orichalcum release wild energy whenever they interact, making the spell unstable. I tried countless times with as many variations, but I never succeeded. How the heck did you do it? Orion asked. There's no such thing as a wild energy release. Lith wasn't going to give away his secret, but if he wanted to obtain something decent to replace his lost weapon, he had to drive a hard bargain. The first step was baiting the prey with an honest, but useless information. It's just that the orichalcum amplifies the feather's energy field. So if you had planned to handle a spell with 100 units of power, you actually get one with 130, which is more than your spell is devised can harness. It makes sense. Orion pondered. Orichalcum has the property to amplify energy-based enchantments. It's the reason orichalcum is considered so precious since its hardness is just above Damascus steel levels. Still, I handled tons of orichalcum, yet only a few crafting techniques always fail, like it happens for the skinwalker. How do you explain that? Because the interaction between ingredients is very strong, and it significantly varies with the amount of adamant in the orichalcum. Lith replied. Only a true mage like him could comfortably wait for the pseudo-core to stabilize before fusing it with an enchanted item. Fake mages use spells that would barely last 20 seconds, and they had no way to assess how great the amplifying effect was. They could adjust the energy output with a Tier 5 spell, but without life vision or invigoration, it would still be like a blind man trying to kill a bird with a single arrow. Would you like to share your method? I've struck a bottleneck in crafting armors because to upgrade my products I would need to use orichalcum or adamant, but the little bastards always mess with my spells. Orion's request was the closest thing to a taboo between mages. Sharing spells was something that could be done only on a voluntary basis, and usually no one would reveal one of their trump cards. Would you like to share your crafting methods? Lith replied with a sneer. Of course not. Orion sighed. What about an exchange? I heard that the gatekeeper has been destroyed. I can give you an even better weapon if you provide me with an orichalcum skinwalker as a study subject. Orion wanted to exploit the situation as well. Any decent warrior knew that a weapon was more than a tool. In their line of work, it was a lifeline. I first need to see what you're offering. As you can see, my crafting process made the armor much more versatile than a normal skinwalker. A gatekeeper is good, but it's not enough. To use it at its full power, it takes a lot of mana. On top of that, it was too frail. It almost broke during the events in Other, Makosh, and even Jambel. What good is a weapon that it's not able to protect my life, and that requires to be protected? Lith painfully remembered every time he had come close to sacrifice the gatekeeper to protect his life. Fine, you're right. Orion yielded, especially because Floria was giving him a bad look. It was just the gift for a 13-year-old, and one I didn't like much at that. I'll make you something worthy of a ranger. You have my word. Lith hung up after showing Orion exactly what his armor could do. Lith didn't ask him for anything specific because he knew that as a craftsman, Orion's pride would force him to give his best to not fall short of Lith's skill. Making specific requests would have been like giving him boundaries, whereas this way Orion could do whatever he wanted and Lith was free to refuse the trade if he considered it to be unfair. To Floria, Lith said, "Well, at least now I can put one of my prototypes to good use. You have no idea how many tweaks it took to craft something that could store my full power without it exploding into my face. Are you really going to give Dad just a prototype? A faulty item?" Now she was giving Lith a bad look. Not faulty, just not the best one. He will tinker with it a lot, probably even damage or destroy it. There's no reason to waste a good armor when even a mediocre one follows the same principles and has the same properties. Lith shrugged. If your father is even one bit like me, if I were to give him a masterpiece, he wouldn't bear the thought of destroying it and limit his experiments as a consequence. This is yours, by the way. Lith handed her a chainmail set that even under the dim light of the camp shone like a precious gem, creating a rainbow on the tunnel ceiling. As I told you, I made a lot of them, but I only need one. You've already almost died today, and if something happens to you, I would never forgive myself. I might not be in love with you anymore, but I love you nonetheless. Lith said, I can't accept it. It's too precious. Both his gesture and his words made Floria incredibly happy and sad at the same time. Lith still cared for her deeply, but not like before. When he looked at her, she could almost perceive an invisible wall between them, and its presence hurt her way more than she expected. Precious, yes. Rare, not so much. I have already given one to Tista and to the rest of my family as well. It took a lot of work to get this right, so I have plenty to spare. I have even one for Quilla and Freya. So get down your high horse and accept my gift. Floria took the armor and imprinted it immediately. There were just cyan crystals bonded with the metal. They proved that it was indeed a prototype, and that Lith lacked powerful resources. Chapter 635. In Floria's family, purple crystals were a given for almost everything. Yet, even most archmages couldn't afford many of them, along with the natural treasures, metals, and ingredients. The Ernest family was one of the most ancient and richest in the Griffin Kingdom, after all. Did you tell Camilla? She asked while hugging the chainmail suit, as if it was something precious and delicate as a newborn. About what? Lith asked. About the things you told me. She deserves to know, and the longer you wait, the harder it will be for her. I don't see how time can make accepting me for whatever I am harder. Lith chuckled. Not that. If she really cares for you, she will be a bit scared at first, but then she will start wondering, why did he wait for so long before telling me? How many more things is he hiding? Camilla might start doubting your feelings and her own as well. Floria conjured a stone dome around herself to get changed into the skinwalker armor, using the cover from the hush zone to not alarm the others. She's right, you know. Sola said. I know. Lith replied. After his pocket watch marked the passing of the hour, Lith woke up a couple of soldiers and went to sleep. He had already used invigoration a few times, and with no gatekeeper to help him, he needed all the edges he could get. After 4 hours had passed, Quilla went to ask Morok to resume their journey. I'm still beat, but we can move. If that witch didn't hunt us down after so much time, she's likely moved to an easier prey. Let's move, the ranger said. Lith recovered the mana crystals and dispelled the silent shroud, while Floria took her place at the center of the group to better coordinate her men, while Quilla moved to the rear, near Lith. Any advice on how to get stronger? My magic has grown since our days at the academies, but I think I've become as physically weak as a kitten. She said, do like I did when I was at the academy. Train until your muscles hurt. Eat meat. Use light magic to assimilate the food and rebuild your tissues. Rinse and repeat until you are too tired to continue. Sounds dull. How long would it take? Quilla asked, making Lith feel her arms' muscles. A week to get some meat on those bones and a few months to get stronger, was his reply. Months? I thought it would be easier. I mean, you and Floria make it seem easy. We trained a lot over the years. If there was a shortcut, everyone would take it. Besides, even if you had a magical way to regain your stamina at will, you would still need to sweat a lot. It's just like magic, it takes time and effort. There's no become an archmage by training 5 minutes a day cheat in life. Lith shrugged. Professor Yandra and her assistant, Rainer Lohman, joined them after a few minutes. Rainer was wearing the uniform of the Black Griffin, a black magician's robe that was made out of a material that seemed to be made out of living darkness. He was the same age as Lith, around 1.72 meters, 5 feet 8 inches, tall, with red hair and blue eyes. The black of his robe made him appear even thinner than he already was. Lith couldn't believe that he was a forge master. Being muscular wasn't a prerequisite, but a forge master's body would be tempered by harnessing the enormous amounts of mana that the advanced crafting processes required. Raynor was holding his chest, and his breath was already short despite the fact that they had just finished resting. After receiving the mana crystals and a new spell from Yandra, Lith felt it indebted to her, so he decided to further smoothen up the previous incident between them. Lith placed his hand over Raynor's shoulder and gave him a bit of life force before treating his injuries. The young man stopped slouching as his chest stopped hurting. "Thank you, but we didn't come here for that. I hoped we could resume our earlier conversation," Yandra said, throwing a mean look at her pupil. "Kid, I'm old, so I need time to recover from a bad wound. What's your excuse? Do you realize you are making even a complete stranger notice your weakness?" At those words, both Raynor and Quilla blushed in embarrassment. They were in a similar situation. Seeing them walking side by side reminded Lith of the odd forge he had found inside the lost city of Heriol. She's the best next thing to an archaeologist, plus Yandra is a forge master. I forgot to ask Orion about it, but maybe she is even more likely to know what that was. Lith thought. I brought him on this expedition to show him that even being an historian requires strength and guts. Yandra said, "Sure, we spend most of our days sitting behind our desk doing research, but when you actually need to search for relics, you can't just ask to monsters and beasts to kindly step aside and let you do your job. You need to learn how to fight, damn it." "But Professor, what about the army or the mercenary guilds? Isn't it easier to get their help rather than pointlessly risking our lives?" Raynor asked. "The army will help you only if you have solid evidence of a discovery that could benefit the kingdom," Quilla replied. "As for mercenaries, I wouldn't trust them to be satisfied with a few coins if you find a priceless treasure. They are mages too." "Exactly," Yandra nodded. "This is likely to be the easiest expedition you'll ever take part in. We have 2 rangers, an elite squad of soldiers, and 6 professors. The number of things that can go wrong with all this firepower is very limited." "Easiest?" Raynor was flabbergasted. "We almost got wiped out before even starting." "My dear, that almost makes all the difference in the world. When I was your age, my so-called bodyguards tried to kill and rob me after I stupidly showed off how much money I had. I wanted to buy their loyalty, not give them a motive, and yet." Raynor swallowed several times, wondering why he was the only nervous one. Quilla was shorter and wimpier than him, yet she looked confident. Lith used the sudden silence to tell Yandra about his recent trip to Heriol. He didn't mention the sword, the booklet, and not even his theory about the lost city being actually a lost academy. Lith had checked the army database, yet Heriol was always referred to as a city in the official documents. Even if Yandra knew the truth, she was unlikely to share it with him. Once Lith reached the part about the black and white forge, her eyes lit like stars with greed and wonder. "Are you sure? A whole forge?" she asked more than once, as if she couldn't believe her own words. "Yes, I can show it to you." Lith materialized a hologram of the forge, mimicking its shape-shifting pattern. "Good gods, how unlucky of you. You found and missed a forge made of pure Davris," she said. "I didn't miss it. It was bolted to the ground, and when I attempted to take it away, the city tried to kill me. There's a big difference." "What's Davris?" Chapter 636. The strongest metal known to man, even stronger than pure adamant. Yandra's words made Lith internally scream in frustration. He clenched his temples, taking deep breaths before finding the strength to ask, "Why have I never heard about it? What makes it so special?" "It's a legendary metal, said to be indestructible. It can be broken, only melted and refined into ingots. It's so rare that I've seen it only when I was allowed to study the artifacts belonging to Vailron Griffin, the first king. In all my years, I've never seen it again, and you say there was a whole forge?" "Yes. Any idea why it shape-shifts?" Lith asked. "Ideas, no? Only a legend, if you're interested." Lith nodded for her to continue. Yandra first explained Lith how, according to the lore, Mogur, the Great Mother, had given birth to the 6 gods of magic. There was one god for each element, and according to such legend, those blessed by the gods would bear their mark on their hair or fur. Lith looked at Quilla's hair and her silvery streaks, finally understanding the meaning of such an odd coloration. According to the fable, the gods had shared part of their essence with all things on Mogar, even metals. Normal metals would receive the blessing of 2 gods at most. The only exceptions were adamant and Davris. Adamant was considered a metal where the elements had failed to achieve a perfect balance, as it was proven by the fact that instead of absorbing the light, adamant would split it into its components like a prism. Davris, instead, was supposed to be a metal where the elements of destruction, fire and darkness would battle against those of creation, light and earth, while the remaining 2 with their dual nature would try to keep the balance. Water gave life, but ice would take it away, and the same applied to air and lightning. The conflicting natures of all 6 elements refused to coexist, so the 3 factions would always be eternally at war. Lakra Silverwing, the first Forge Master, had written in her diaries that it was up to the mage to tip the scale by adding the 7th element, the only one that the Davris lacked. The element of life, more commonly known as mana. It sounds like a load of rubbish. Lith said, I would agree with you if the artifacts I studied didn't shapeshift anymore. I saw King Marone using the Sword of Seifel, and he can make the whole blade change color according to the element he needs to boost. I wasn't much younger back then, but I can still count. The sword turned into 7 colors: red, yellow, black, white, blue, orange, and emerald green. The Davris ingots, instead, would follow a pattern similar to the one you showed me. Wait, are you telling me that adamant is nothing but dead Davris? Lith asked. At least I think so. The royal family has ingots of Davris, but no one knows how to use them. Plus, if the legend is right, then it's only a matter of time before they lose their special properties. Otherwise, why let experts like me study Valoran's armor or his sword? Litha's mind started spinning like a top, trying to put together everything he had learned ever since he had arrived on Mogar. The shades in the hair of living creatures, the different colors of mana cores and crystals, the 7 eyes of his hybrid form, and now even the Davris. If I'm right, life happens on Mogar when the 6 elements the world energy holds become one. According to such logic, by absorbing enough world energy, living creatures can become awakened by becoming part of the planet's breathing cycle. A blood core would be nothing but a mana core which has lost its light element and craves for it, whereas a black core it's nothing but pure darkness. Also, it would explain why the Davris forge I found back in Heriol almost had a core, whereas the adamant one Zalgrish paid me with doesn't. Lith thought, do you mind me asking why you're telling me so many things? Not to sound ungrateful, but most of them sound like classified information. The kingdom usually likes to play close to the vest. Lith didn't believe in generosity, especially from someone he had just met. His companions, the Erna's couple, even the royals, they were all indebted to him. Their bond of trust was based on having been together through thick and thin or on the services he had provided. He could smell that something was off with Yandra. You're quite perceptive. Yes, it's classified information, but you work for the kingdom as well, and I am looking for someone that could inherit my legacy. Raynor might take my place as history professor in a few years, but I doubt he'll become a decent forge master any soon. The kid lacks motivation, and even if he finds it during this expedition, I don't have that much time left. Yandra said, I'm sorry, Professor, but I checked your condition earlier, and you are just fine. Why do you talk like that? Lith was getting more confused by the second. The offer wasn't that good either. He wouldn't take an awakened master lightly due to all the responsibilities and the obedience it would imply, let alone a fake mage one. I'm not talking about death, young man, only about retirement. Yandra laughed. I've lived for over 60 years, and I'm tired of a life of duty. I want to spend what time I have left with my family, doing things I like. I was thinking about it for a while, and almost getting killed by a random creature as if I was just a first-year student made me think. I wasn't able to defend my assistant. Heck, I couldn't even defend myself. It made me feel terribly old and helpless. Discovering that a kid has succeeded in crafting orichalcum artifacts whereas I failed at it for over 40 years sure didn't help. She sighed. Orion told me that you might be interested in working for an academy, and I'd be glad if you could replace me in the forge mastering department once I retire. The White Griffin can't offer you the same opportunity. The professors there are too young. It would take decades for a spot to open. Interesting. So it must have been her telling Orion about my new skinwalker armor. I might work with this development. Maybe I could even ask her about the runes and the sword I found in Huriol. Lith thought. Yandra insisted on her pitch, and Lith listened to her while using Solace and Life Vision to keep their surroundings in check. He noticed that the underground was populated by several creatures, but they would all shy away from their lights. Some would follow them for a while, but after finding no opening and maybe even perceiving the power exuding from the expedition, they would soon leave. Solace identified some as magical beasts, others as monsters, whereas the rest were a complete mystery. Unfortunately, none of their mystical sense could see more than a silhouette, so Lith couldn't even figure out which was humanoid and which was just a two-legged creature. The walls and the ground were too rough to have been carved, so the passage had to be natural. The scratches and the claw marks he spotted on several occasions, though, were not. Chapter 637. They were too regular, as if someone had carved directions in the stone to not get lost. Lith pointed them to Yandra, who carbon copied them with a piece of paper and chalk. How the heck did you notice them? She blurted out after calling the rest of her colleagues to take a look at his discovery. Secret of the trade. Lith replied, since revealing his fire vision was out of the question. The humidity in the cave had filled the carvings with water, making them stand out like a sore thumb to his thermographic vision. After studying the carvings, the unanimous conclusion was that they were indeed some kind of ancient language. If I'm right, our expedition will go in history books, said Professor Elkas from the Fire Griffin. I recognize this alphabet. It's an ancient dialect of the ODI language. Cheers and applause to both Lith and Elkas erupted from the group as everyone took their books out of their respective dimensional items to decipher the writings. The ODI. Most of the professors and their assistants repeated enthusiastically so often that it almost resembled a chant. Who the heck are the ODI? Morok said, followed by the soldiers. Fuck me sideways. The ODI. Lith thought. They were the reason he had chosen to be assigned to the Keller region in the first place, but he had never predicted to stumble into their legacy with so many people to babysit. Worse than that, the professors could actually do more harm than good, so he started to think of a way to ditch them with no consequences for his military career. What's wrong, Lith? Quilla asked. You're doing your I'm screwed face. Seriously, we have spent too much time together. Lith didn't like being read so easily. Floria he could understand, but Quilla too? After setting a perimeter to defend the blabbering professors, Lith took Morok, Quilla, and Floria aside to share with them the history of the ODI Kala had taught him about. According to the books in Scarlet's lab, they were an ancient and powerful race that had conquered all illnesses. They had reigned above the other races until they had become so conceited to resort to forbidden magic in the attempt to become immortal. They had developed spells able to move the conscience of an individual from one body to another, achieving eternal youth. Their plan had backfired for two reasons. The first was the fact that the new body was younger, but the talent for magic wasn't carried over. The second was that their victims in the ODI lower class had rebelled to such use of their children, leading to a revolution that had wiped the ODI from the face of Mogar. On top of that, the ODI were considered to have laid the foundation for lichhood. Let me get this straight. Morok said, if any of this crazy-ass story of yours is true, then rather than ruins we might stumble into a populated city, since those guys are supposed to live as long as they got a spare body. Also, they might have access to technology as good as ours if not even liches. Lith nodded in reply. He doubted the ODI could have actually progressed that much, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Okay, I'm out of here. I'll call my superiors and abort the mission. I've got plans. I'm too young to die just a few months before retirement, and in the company of a group of fossils at that. Floria waited for the ranger to be far enough before saying, anything else we should be aware of? Yes. The ODI were incredibly arrogant and racist. Quilla said, they believed to be the master race, and that everything besides magic was below them. They were divided into castes according to their magical talent. I'm telling you this because if somehow their protections are still working, they'll discriminate us based on our mana. Another thing, to avoid doing menial jobs they had slaves, but for protections they used golems. Lith and Floria stared at Quilla with surprise. How do you know all this stuff? They asked in unison. Because even though what they did was wrong, they reached the apex of body sculpting. All historical sources agree on the ODI having truly defeated all illnesses. It's not just a groundless legend. They managed to do something we still can't. If we get our hands on their data, at least the sacrifice of their victims will do some good. We could achieve the same results without injuring anyone. Quilla was trying to convince herself as well as the others. She couldn't stop thinking about the moral implications of using such bloodstained knowledge. My biggest fear is that the modifications the ODI underwent to become immune to disease might have also caused the collapse of their society. Such a deep change in the life force might have easily affected their minds. She thought, "Is the expedition you needed my help with also related to the ODI?" Lith asked. Yes. Their empire was located in the Keller region, but aside from some small ruins, nothing relevant has ever been found. I joined this expedition hoping I might find something that could help me to locate their capital, Reschia, but I would have never thought we would find something in the ODI language. What if we are about to discover Reschia itself? It's unlikely. A capital is a place that must be easily accessible. A city with a constant flow of people, merchandise, and a lot of guards. Floria said. Signs on the walls and underground tunnels make me think more about a secret facility of sorts. Their debate was interrupted by Morok's return. God damn it. The High Command ordered to continue with the mission and seal all the communication with the outside. He took a small device the size of a glass marble out of his dimensional amulet. A short pulse of orange light spread through the tunnel, drawing the attention of the professors. Lith expected them to be enraged by such lack of trust, but they looked all smug instead. Excellent move, Ranger Eerie, said Professor Gaku from the Crystal Griffin. She was one of the youngest in the group, a woman in her early 40s with several blue streaks in her light brown hair and dark eyes. According to the markings found by Ranger Verhen, we are about to find the ruins of Kulla. What's that? Lith asked, turning to Quilla, who shrugged in reply. I've no idea either, but since it must have taken a lot of effort to build something so deep below the earth, it must be something important. Captain Ernest, I don't need to tell you how security has just become of paramount importance. Gaka said. We'll keep protecting you at the best of our abilities. Floria nodded. Not us, foolish child. I mean our discovery. Ranger Eerie, didn't you explain anything to her? No, because you butted in before I could. Morok said with a snort. ODI ruins are considered a state secret. Revealing their position or stealing any kind of artifact and knowledge is an act of treason. According to my commanding officer, all ODI ruins discovered so far contained priceless treasures. Everything we found is considered a royal property. At that point, Morok turned to Floria. We're now under martial law, and since you are the highest-ranked officer, the command is now yours. It makes me happy because everything that goes wrong, it's your fault and not mine. Chapter 638. What are your orders, Captain Ernest? There was something in the way Morok said the word that made it sound like an insult. Let's move. We need to reach the ruins as soon as possible. Ranger Eerie, you and 2 of my men take point. Ranger Verhen, cover our back. Everyone else, if someone tries to sneak away from the group, strike first and ask questions later. The 3 soldiers nodded, making the assistant professor swallow. None of them had expected their bodyguards to turn into their jailers. Morok picked up the pace, and so did everyone else. Everyone walked in silence. They were too busy watching their steps to waste energy chatting. Lith was alone with Quillo again, and was now worried about another unexpected turn of events. The more they advanced, the fewer creatures he would spot along the corridors until the group was completely alone. Whatever Kulla is, it seems that no one dares to come close to it. Let's hope I don't meet my third lich. Lith thought. After more than 4 hours of walking, the group needed a break. From that moment onwards, only the members of the military were allowed to stand guard, whereas the others had to stay grouped together, making it harder for anyone to escape from their watch. Aside from moss, nothing grew inside the tunnels, making them all look identical. As hours turned into days, most members of the expedition started to fall into depression. There was no sunlight, the air was stale and smelly, making it painful to breathe from time to time. Morok was still able to find his way thanks to the marks he had left while escaping from the abomination goblin hybrids, but every time he opened a new passage, he could see doubt and mistrust in the eyes of the others. They were growing afraid that he had lost his way and their lives in the process. The group was so deep inside Mogre that dimensional magic was useless. All places looked the same, so opening a warp steps was no longer an option. Using earth magic with no idea where they were was likely to result in getting stranded or even cause a fatal cave-in. The impossibility to do anything but walking, sleeping, and eating was a heavy burden for everyone, which worsened with each rest they took. The dullness of their routine turned the enthusiasm of the discovery into a bleak, hopeless silence. More than once one of the assistants had a claustrophobic attack and needed to be sedated. According to Litha's pocket watch, only 4 days had passed, but to everyone the march seemed to have lasted weeks. Here we are. This is where I was forced to stop during my first visit. Now it's all up to you, smarty pants. Morok said. The group had reached a huge underground cave of irregular shape, which was at least 100 meters, 330 feet, wide with a ceiling about 20 meters, 66 feet, high. Once again, Lith could see that aside from moss, there was no life form dwelling in the vicinities. The floor was too regular to not be man-made, and several corridors departed from the cave. Each one of them had been clearly realized with earth magic and was wide enough to allow a huge carriage to easily pass. Where do they lead? Lith asked. I don't know. I had no time to play explorer. My priority was survival. The moment we were cleared to leave, we took the same path back to the surface. It was the safest route. Morok replied. As you have probably noticed, there's not much to eat down here, so any predator that gets stranded will welcome our arrival as if we're a free meal ready for the taking. We can't close the passages without running out of fresh air, but we can't leave them like this. The two rangers started to put tripwires and alarms along the corridors, while the professors studied the structure at the end of the cave. There was a huge door there, so perfectly crafted that it would have been invisible if not for the moss that over the years had grown inside its small crevices, outlining its shape. It was a double door made of rock, so high that it almost reached the ceiling, and so wide that 3 carriages could easily pass together through it. The problem was that there was no sign of its activation mechanism. Soon the cave was filled with light and noise as everyone did his best to find a solution to the conundrum in front of them. The array detection spells perceived several magical formations protecting both the door and the wall, making them immune to earth magic. How the heck can those things still work? Aren't arrays supposed to fade without maintenance? One of the assistants asked. There are several possible explanations for this phenomenon, but your clearance level is too low to learn about any of them. So shut up and help us open this damn door. Gaku replied. Lith only needed a glance to learn the answer to that question. Just like most of the lost cities, whatever was behind the door had been built above a mana geyser. The arrays could draw their sustenance from it, and unless an event of catastrophic proportions happened, they would last until someone turned them off. Lith and Solus consulted all their warden books, but the design of the arrays was unknown. The only thing they were certain of was that they were powerful and that they would react badly if someone tried to forcefully open the door. There are several points in the wall where the word energy has been accumulated and compressed. It can't have any other purpose than to act as a defense mechanism in case of attack. Lith thought. To Morok, Yandra asked, Do you have any suggestions on how to open the door? No. During my first visit, my main worry was not dying of starvation and fortifying the place. He pointed at the south wall, where a few small buildings had been created with earth magic. The ground in the vicinities was full of holes big and deep enough that moving recklessly would likely result in a sprain or worse, depending on how badly one would fall. What about you? Floria asked. Now that she was aware of Litha's life vision, she could expect one of his usual miracles. None. He used hush to avoid being heard. The cave was so full of echoes that even a whisper would be carried around, making it noticeable. The design of the arrays is too complex to understand something on a first glance. I need to study them carefully, and then I'll let you know. Are you saying you can see arrays too? Floria was flabbergasted. As clearly as I can see you. Unlike people, they are entirely made of mana, so it's much easier to notice their details. Be careful with the door. I think it's surrounded by magical traps. The situation made no sense to Lith. He knew thanks to life vision that no one was around. Yet Morok had told him how they had met so many monsters during their stay to be forced to fortify the place and even resort to eating them. The question is, did it happen out of pure bad luck? Was it some kind of automatic defense mechanism like the arrays, or did someone send the monsters to kill them? Lith thought. I guess it's only a matter of time before we learn the answer. Solus replied. Chapter 639. Soon fatigue trampled over the renewed enthusiasm from reaching their destination. The professors had come prepared. They had all the necessary to set up a few defensive arrays before going to sleep. I don't know how long we'll stay here, but we can't allow depression to dull our wits. Give me a few minutes, Professor Yandra said. After a while, the cave was lit by a sphere of light that resembled a small sun, positioned in the middle of the ceiling. The array provided both light and warmth, even giving the ceiling a blue color. A second array made the air fresher, ridding it of the excess humidity. Despite their simple effects, the two combined arrays made wonders to lift the morale of the expedition. The solar cycle array will reproduce the solar phases, including sunset. Yandra explained while checking her pocket watch. This way we can recover our normal sleep cycle and have an artificial night with an artificial moon that will provide us light. Morok had already sealed the path behind them, so Floria's soldiers could now guard the natural corridors without worrying that anyone could escape. Without Ranger Eerie, there was no way out, and the cave offered no privacy. The group expanded the building Morok had previously created and split it into separate spaces for men and women. Once the camp was set, a hot meal consumed around a fire gave everyone the energy they needed to resume their task with optimism. Now the members of the expedition didn't feel lost anymore. They had a purpose, a roof, and light to guide their way. While Lith searched the stone door for a way in, he noticed that Floria and Quilla had joined the rest of the team. Both of them had what looked like a thin wand made of silver that resembled a conductor's baton. They would strike with it at any unusual rock or apparently out-of-place detail they found. Each time the wand hit, it would produce a ding, but nothing else. Since Forgemaster professors like Yandra had a similar tool, Lith felt compelled to ask, Quilla, what is that thing? A Royal Forgemaster tool. If you cast the proper incantation, it forces an enchanted item to reveal its nature. She explained. It can tell you what a spell does? Lith was as shocked as his voice sounded. No, silly. She laughed. It just reveals the magical nature of an otherwise seemingly normal item. Then it's up to the Forgemaster to study it. We're looking for some kind of enchanted secret compartment. Since when the two of you are Forgemasters? Lith asked. I started to practice it seriously after I killed Uriel. I spent the entire year I was cooped up home learning the basics. It helped me a lot to keep my head clear. Her voice was sad but firm. Quilla had come to terms with the actions the slave ring had forced her to commit, but that couldn't erase the guilt she felt for the death of one of her best friends. I, instead, started as soon as I finished my boot camp. Floria was eager to change the topic. She didn't want to let Quilla dwelling too long on such bad memories. I couldn't stand my men having poor equipment because there's never enough budget. Plus, I always wanted to follow my father's footsteps. Once I got rid of grades, I could finally take my time and learn things at my own pace. Why have I never heard of such a tool? Lith was kind of envious. He didn't need it, but it would have made it much easier for him to justify his findings with life vision. Also, if he had Orion's teachings and resources, the sky would be the only limit for his true forge mastery. You can always dump Camilla and marry Floria, if she's okay with it. Solus sneered. Sorry, you are right. I should stop thinking with my wallet. Lith replied. Because it's a secret of the trade. Yandra said. Only Royal Forge Masters know how to craft one, and only they can entrust one to someone else. Doing that puts in danger their own title and status. It's part of the legacy of Vaelron Griffin, the first king. Are you perchance interested in my offer now? Lith was about to give her a polite but firm hard pass when his nose caught an unfamiliar scent. Now that the air was clear, his perceptions were back to their full efficiency. What's that noise? Morok said, putting everyone on the alert. How the heck did he hear something above our voices? Lith thought while running toward the entrance and activating life vision. The previously empty tunnels were now filled with unknown creatures. They triggered all the alarms the two rangers had set along the way before finally coming into the light. It was a group of magical beasts with the appearance of humanoid crabs, who stood over 2 meters, 6 feet 7 inches, tall. There was no head above their shoulders, just a pair of stalks ending with eyes that moved independently, allowing them to have a 360-degree sight. Their bodies were covered with a thick and pale white chitinous exoskeleton that made them look like stone colossuses come to life. They had huge pincers instead of hands, big enough that they could easily chop a bull's head off. They had no equipment, but between their bulky size and their bright green mana cores, Lith could tell that they probably didn't need it. The soldiers stuck at the creatures with their blades, but they were easily repelled by the exoskeletons without leaving a scratch. Then, the soldiers activated the spells imbued in their magical rings, unleashing lightning bolts against the magical beasts while seeking the protection of the array. The electricity slipped over the humanoid crabs like rain on a window, inflicting no damage. Using fire magic was too risky inside caves. The air was thin, and the only fresh oxygen was that provided by the ever-present moss. Fire might make the cave inhabitable or destroy the moss needed for the group's survival. Hence, the well-trained soldiers used earth magic to conjure a barrage of earth spikes to crush open the exoskeletons or at least pin the creatures against the walls long enough for the professors to prepare a powerful spell that would finish them in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, the creatures only needed a wave of their pincer hands to overpower the control of the soldiers over the spikes and threw them against the barrier. The crab beings were smart enough to aim for someone who wasn't the one who had cast the spell so that they could actually hurt them. Don't waste your spells. Dinner here is called tack. Their only weak points are the joints and the eyes. Morok said. One of his twin short swords pierced into the midriff of the tack in front of him, hitting its white cartilage with surgical precision despite it being almost indistinguishable from the same colored exoskeleton. The creature tried to crush the ranger with its pincers, but Morok stepped back, taking out the blade from the open wound as a trickle of blue blood came out of it. He also hit the creature with a palm strike, apparently using the momentum of the hit to propel himself backward faster. Right after the dodge, a thud could be heard and smoke came out of all the joints of the tech as it collapsed to the ground, making them visible. Chapter 640. Morok had actually cast a fireball right through the open wound and into the innards of the creature, using its own hard shell to trap the powerful explosion inside the beast. I like my crab well cooked, and now you know where to hit. Time to earn your pay, boys, he said with a feral smile before moving on to the next opponent. Litha's blade, one of the failed prototypes, went for the eyes instead. He wanted to check why Morok had chosen such a dangerous strategy when there was a much easier target. The answer came in the form of the eye stalks actually being articulated peduncles capable of being folded back into the shell in case of danger. Plan B it is, Lith thought, putting the blade back inside his pocket dimension. Fusion magic empowered his body as Solus turned into her glove form, fully enveloped by the silver protection of the orichalcum. The fist struck the tech's abdomen like a jackhammer, lifting the creature off the ground of a few centimeters as cracks spread over its armor. The waves of pain the hit caused made the eyes reflexively pop out, allowing Lith to grab them with his free hand and discharge lightning directly into them. The electricity traveled straight into the brain of the tech, killing it on the spot. A second creature, incredibly nimble despite its size, circled around its dead companion and released a hail of razor-sharp ice crystals. Water fusion is a game two can play, Lith thought. Now that he knew the two elements tech could use, he could predict their basic strategy. Lith sidestepped the attack, letting it harmlessly strike the barrier as a palm strike injected a volley of plague arrows inside the enemy. Seeing that Lith had killed two enemies in the same time he had needed to kill one, Morok clicked his tongue. Fine, let's get serious. Pickhammer, Morok said, sheathing and unsheathing his blades in the blink of an eye. The weapons shape-shifted into one-handed battle hammers that closely resembled Solus's forge-mastering hammer, having both a hammerhead and a pick. Morok struck with the pick side of the weapon at the carapace of the closest tech, but to no avail. His strength wasn't enough to pierce its rock-hard shell. At least not until a second later, when the second hammer hit the head of the first one as if it was a nail. The pick crushed both the exoskeleton and the heart of the creature, instantly killing it. The soldiers and the professors were so shocked by the display of raw power in front of their eyes that they stared dumbly at the scene, incapable of moving a muscle. The techs started to coordinate their moves, attacking in waves and dying in waves. Morok would crush between his hammers any pincer that came too close for comfort, whereas Lith used water fusion to be as nimble as the techs and air fusion to be faster than them. Every one of his palm strikes would send one of the creatures flying against its comrades, spreading his deadly touch to all of them, since Plague Arrow's ethereal nature would pierce through any kind of matter until all of its energy was exhausted. Good gods, Tirth said. She was the second most powerful mage in her unit after Floria. I thought they were just tall, dark, and rudesome, but those two are not human. Are all rangers like that, Captain? No. There is a reason why, unlike the academies, the army ranks monster cadets above the special ones. Floria replied, snapping out of her reverie. Which one did you date? The less rude one. Now stop flapping your gums and drink your potions. They need backup. She was right. The first group was already dead, but a much larger one was flooding out of all tunnels. Are we really going to stand here like morons? Professor Syndra from the Lightning Griffin yelled. Captain, buy me 5 seconds, and I'll close the curtains on this madness. Floria nodded and started yelling orders. Stall them with hit and run tactics. There's weakness in numbers. Darkness magic may be slow, but there's too many of them. If you shoot in the middle, you are bound to hit some of them. What can I do? Quilla asked. Stay behind me and get ready to treat the wounded. The techs were too many, forcing the 2 rangers on the defensive back to back to avoid being surrounded. Nice glove, Morok said. Nice weapons. Also duck, Lith replied while clapping his hands and emitting a silvery sound due to the orichalcum covering them. What duck? Oh shit. Morok kneeled just in time as Lith's hands released a ring of darkness energy that expanded outwards, mowing through the horde around them. The spell wasn't strong enough to kill so many techs, but it temporarily weakened them. It allowed the 2 rangers to escape the encirclement and find shelter inside the array. Floria's soldiers were shooting darkness magic non-stop, killing dozens of enemies at once while she unleashed her Tier 5 Mage Knight spell, Boombox. All the spells in a Mage Knight's grimoire could be cast with only one hand, making their casting speed exceptionally fast. Their greatest downside was their very short range, but against so many enemies amassed in the little space between the tunnels and the barrier, there was no such problem. 5 square-shaped ice shields with a side length of 7 meters, 23 feet, surrounded the techs from all directions but below, trapping them. Before the creatures could smash through the ice, a sphere of wind exploded in the middle of the spell. The thunderclap was followed by a shockwave that rebounded on the ice walls after being amplified by a resonance effect. The shockwaves grew in power every time they hit an ice wall, piercing through all the prisoners after each sonic speed rebound. The techs crumbled like sand castles facing a high tide, but more of them came out of the tunnels. Everyone stepped back, Professor Syndra said. He lifted both his arms, conjuring a tidal wave out of thin air that crashed against the techs both inside the cave and those still inside the tunnels. No offense, Gramps, but all that water will just make much easier for them destroying the array with enough ice to make winter look like summer. Morok said. Professor Syndra's lips curled up in a disgusted expression. It was hard to tell if he was more insulted or annoyed by the ranger's obvious remark. Once you're old, you need to eat a lot of fish. It's good for your memory. Corona discharge, Syndra said with a flat tone. The mother of all lightning bolts erupted from his body, in the wake of the tidal wave. Corona discharge was a Tier 5 War Mage spell. It used water to soak the opponent so that the following bolt of lightning could bypass all protections and hit the weak spots of an enemy. In the tech's case, their eyes. Like all Tier 5 spells, both the water and the lightning were guided by Syndra's will, making them impossible to escape from. Over 50 techs died in an instant, their bodies emitting the characteristic aroma of stewed lobster. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Lith asked. Yes, I called dibs on the well-cooked ones. I know we just ate, but all this action made me work an appetite. Morok replied. Chapter 641. Those words made Lith almost slap his own forehead, but luckily he remembered in time about the orichalcum still covering his hands. Those are water creatures, but there can't be a big enough water body around here to sustain such a big colony. If that was the case, we should hear the underground water stream, or at least smell a lot of humidity in the air. Does any of you perceive any of that? He asked. The group started to sniff the air like a pack of hounds. "No, the air is drier than many places we crossed on our way here," said Professor Gaku. "Exactly. So where the heck did they come from? Why we didn't hear them coming despite the ever-present echo?" "Those are good questions, but I can at least answer one of them," Professor Yandra said. "Techs manipulate Earth. They must have made the ground softer to avoid making noise. That doesn't explain why they were so focused on us. If they were starving, they would have eaten their fallen first. Instead, they kept attacking like their lives were on the line, even though we did nothing to provoke them." Lith looked at the tunnels. They were empty again. There was no trace of scouts or survivors fleeing from the scene. "It doesn't make sense. My paranoia sense keeps tingling," he thought. "I think he is right," Professor Syndra said. "Either the ODI's longevity is a hard truth rather than a myth, or we must have activated some automated defense mechanism. No matter the answer, both of them mean that we are in front of the discovery of a lifetime. Half of US will. With all due respect, I give the orders here, Professor." Floria cut him short. "Before resuming our search, the wardens must strengthen the barrier while my soldiers and the rangers rest. In the meantime, all those that didn't do anything will guard the tunnels." "Sir, yes, sir," Morok said, spitting a bit of tech meat from the arm he was chewing. "How certain are you that they didn't just come here following our noise?" she asked Lith with a whisper. "Remember this?" Lith tapped the side of his eyes, resuming to speak as soon as she nodded him to continue. "I'm 100% sure that those corridors were empty. Then there were 10 techs, and after we started killing them, others popped up. I mean it. I didn't see anyone walking. Then please rest, and help us to find a way to open that door. This place is already giving me the creeps." Lith used accumulation while he looked around the cave. He remembered that both the White Griffin Academy and his tower had surveillance mirrors, so the idea that someone was actually looking at them from a distance was quite likely. Life Vision scanned every centimeter of the cave, searching for the transmitting device. Divination didn't exist. To spy on someone, it was needed a transmitter that would capture the reflected light like a camera would and warp the images to the mirror. It could have been anything, but its magical aura was supposed to be visible. Unless it's cloaked, Solus suggested. It wouldn't make sense. Only awakened can sense mana, and I doubt that those ODI creeps were awakened. Otherwise, each body they occupied would have lasted centuries, and they would have kept their magical talent. Lith replied, "Maybe they weren't awakened, but they might have been aware of their existence." Solus suggested, "Solus, do you realize that you've become a bigger pessimist than I am?" Those words put an end to their argument and made Solus wish they were both wrong. Solus about the ODI and Lith about her. Unlike invigoration, accumulation had no rejuvenating effects. It would simply absorb the surrounding world energy and feed it to Lith's mana core, making it stronger. Since whatever Kula was, it was built on a mana geyser, Lith could draw much more nourishment than usual from the environment. Even though hours of accumulation don't amount to much of a power-up, if I'm right about someone operating Kula's defenses, every bit can help. He thought as his enhanced body naturally recovered his mana and stamina. While Morok slept to recover from the fatigue of the fight, Lith ate some food and searched for the activation mechanism of the door. The entire stone wall had been enchanted and several arrays overlapped on its surface. Whoever did this was indeed a master warden, Solus thought. The runes comprising the various arrays never touch each other and have an even spacing between them, allowing the runes to work in perfect harmony. On top of that, it makes really hard to understand which rune belongs to which array. I'm afraid that I was right about the ODI being aware of Awakened. Maybe and maybe not. Lith replied. There are things like Scarlet's Pants Nez or General Vorga's staff that can make them visible to the naked eye. So far the only thing we know for certain is that they were crafty bastards. Lith placed his hands on the stone wall, as if he was searching for crevices or a hidden switch, and activated Invigoration. It was the only means he had to bypass any kind of cloaking device that could hide the truth from his eyes. Invigoration required Lith to override someone's or something's mana flow with his own. It was a skill he had developed as a kid, and it was second nature to him. Unfortunately, he had never used it on something that big. There was only so much space he could cover without spreading his resources too thin, dulling his senses. To make matters worse, the complexity of the arrays and the enchantment of the wall made it hard for him to properly examine their countless details. On the bright side, Solus could now deactivate her mana sense and focus solely on deciphering the incantation by sharing Litha's senses. Litha's antics drew more than one surprised look and several scoffs. Ranger Verhan, this is a waste of your abilities. If groping a wall was enough to bypass a protective array, then wardens and forge masters wouldn't have spent so much time and effort developing their spells for tasks like the one at hand. Professor Cinder said. There was no mockery in his voice, only sincere worry. If that idiot of my assistant was half as capable as Lith, instead of cackling at him like a child, he thought. Thanks for your concern, Professor. Yet we must consider that the ODI might have taken spells into account and resorted to some kind of mechanical trigger. Lith replied with the first believable explanation that came to his mind. Excellent point. Did you hear that, Callel? Take a lesson from Ranger Verhan and use your brain. If by the end of the expedition your contributions amount to nothing, I'll have you fired. Just like the other assistants, Callel had been noting down his master's findings so that he could later revise and make sense of the bigger picture. The rest of the time, the youths had been laughing behind the wall, groping Ranger's back. Suddenly, there wasn't much to laugh about. Instead of mindlessly writing, he started to rack his brain for a solution to the conundrum at hand. Chapter 642. By the time the artificial sun started to set, the members of the expedition decided to call it quits for the day. Yandra could make the sun rise whenever she wanted, but that would mess up their sleep cycle even more. Everyone was tired either because of the constant spell casting or from trying to make sense of the collected data about the wall. Some, like Quilla, had a splitting headache from doing both. Morok and Floria's soldiers were pretty relaxed instead. They had slept, eaten, and spent their time playing dice or cards while guarding the tunnels. How do your weapons work, exactly? Lith asked Morok while eating dinner. The problem with the wilds is that you never know what mess you're going to stumble into. So I had a good forge master made me orichalcum weapons capable of shape-shifting at will. The sheaths are part of the weapons and the key to trigger their shape-shifting abilities. If I need them to be heavier, the extra mass comes from the sheaths. They are also made with orichalcum and are thicker than they look. Solus studied their pseudo-core with mana sense and was relieved to discover that they had no runes engraved on their surface. It seems that we are right. Runes must be a state secret. The pseudo-core is very complex, and it even required purple crystals to be stabilized. She thought. They shape-shift. That's it, Lith asked. That's it, my ass. Morok was offended. They saved my life countless times. They have a few minor incantations too, but nothing more. Energy-based properties and orichalcum are hard to not mix together, smartass. I don't have that kind of money, he said while looking at the skinwalker in envy. Sorry, I didn't mean to belittle them. It's just that between the orichalcum and the purple crystals, I expected something a little flashier. What does your gauntlet do? Morok asked, ignoring the apology. Not much yet. It's a work in progress. So far it can store a few low-tier spells and serve as a last-ditch weapon. The glove's fingers turned into claws. I think it's very useful already. If you ever mass-produce them, I call dibs. Why use stone as its foundation, though? I told you, it's a work in progress. I use cheap materials because I constantly upgrade it. Lith replied. No duh, man. You are too stingy. Those magic crystals are smaller than my eyes and green and yellow at that. No offense, but that's lame. Lame? I've worked my ass off for years to get those 2 gems, things, whatever they are. Solus thought. Can I please punch him on the nose? Any idea about how to open the door? Lith was stuck between a rock and a moron, so he was eager to change the topic. None, and I don't even care. I get paid no matter the result of the expedition. Fighting an eldritch and those techs should be already worth a hefty bonus. Anything more is just gravy. Since there was nothing to get from him, except maybe getting cleaned up at gambling, Lith went to speak with Quilla. Aside from the professors and Solus, she was definitely the smartest person in the cave. How's your head? Lith asked. After I treated myself, the pain is gone, but I'm still foggy. I can't waste a tonic on our first day. She replied while massaging her temples. Gods, I feel so useless. I'm more of a deadweight in battle now than when we were still at the White Griffin and I can't even open a damn door. That's not true. You saved Floria's life and many others. As for the door, I'd say you are in good company. Lith tried to cheer her up. That was days ago. The only thing I've achieved today is getting prime calluses on my fingers. She showed him her right hand. After swinging the Forge Master wand for hours and using healing magic to treat blisters and skin irritation, her skin had hardened. Quilla could easily get rid of them, but since she seemed to have many hours of wands swinging ahead of her, it would have been pointless. While they were talking, one of the assistants passed them a copy of the information collected by the members of the expedition during the day. Withholding knowledge in front of a common hurdle was pointless. Each professor wanted the glory for themselves, but unless they got past the door, there was no glory to take. The data had been sorted so that each array could be studied separately from the others and from the door's enchantment, making it easier to identify their rune patterns and energy nodes. There was a lot of warden jargon on each piece of paper, and Lith could only understand the terms that Kulia's arrays and those he knew had in common. Quilla squinted her eyes hard as if there was something she couldn't focus properly on. Great, my headache is back. I give up. Good night, Lith. She put the notes in her dimensional amulet and stormed away. Why didn't you help her with invigoration? Solus asked. She's tired and frustrated with herself. The headache gives her a reason to rest and blow off some steam. If I make her head clear and she still fails, Quilla will feel twice as useless. Once because I fixed something that she couldn't, and the second time because she would have no excuse for failing to open the door. Lith replied. Lith wasn't prideful. He didn't care how he solved a problem as long as he succeeded, so he had no qualms asking for help to his betters. He walked towards Yandra's campfire. Up to that point, the professor from the Black Griffin was the one he had the best relationship with. She had already taught him a few things, and maybe she was willing to expand his understanding of ancient arrays. Professor Yandra, maybe it's a stupid question, but why no one has tried to use Clean Slate to open the door? Clean Slate was a Tier 4 Forge Master spell that would temporarily disable an enchantment, so in theory, it might solve their problem. It's not a stupid question, Ranger Varan. This array here, she said while showing him one of her notes, prevents the lock from being tampered from the outside. If we use Clean Slate, it will trigger the first energy node and cause a chain reaction that will activate all the other arrays. Damn, I can't even use invigoration, then. He thought. It's not a spell, but it's likely to be perceived as an external energy. I don't know what most of the other arrays do, but they are too powerful for a blind tinkering approach. Lith started to ask her about all the runes he was unfamiliar with, and Yandra was happy to answer all of his questions. They had got off on the wrong foot, but the more time Lith spent with her, the more Yandra reminded him of his late mentor, Nana. Yandra wasn't that old nor her back hunched, but the fierce light in her eyes was the same as Nana's, and so it was her shameless approach to get what she wanted from people. It's fantastic that someone as young as you are has already comprehended the importance that every single rune comprising an array has. Most students are only interested in learning how to cast an array and how to bring them down. They don't care for the hows or the whys involved in the process. She patted his back before yawning. Chapter 643. It's hard to miss their importance when you see how runes affect the space around themselves, and how the order of their activation can make so that the effects of two arrays comprised by the same runes are completely different. Lith thought, alas, I'm too old and tired to keep going. The moon is high already. Get some rest. If more creatures attack us tomorrow, I'll be counting on your protection. Yandra smothered the fire with a finger snap and entered the women quarters. Lith remained alone for a while, sorting the new information acquired with Solus, and taking notes on his own papers to later store them inside Soluspedia. Soon fatigue gave him a headache, and his brain begged him for a break. Fighting is so much easier. He sighed. Your body can withstand a lot, but your mind still needs to relax. Go to sleep. I'll keep an eye on the situation. Outside her tower, Solus was unable to sleep or rest. It gave Lith an edge in many situations, but in the long term, it affected her sanity. Lith went to sleep near a guard post, ready to act at the first sign of danger. He trusted no one. Morok was too strange, and the soldiers too weak for his taste. The professors were magically strong, some even more than Lith, but as Korg had demonstrated, it only took a single shot to take them down. Paranoia was a cruel mistress, but it had served him well too many times to ignore her. Except when it was dead wrong, of course. When morning came and nothing happened, Lith cursed at himself. Hindsight is always 100% correct. Solus chuckled. The members of the expedition went back to study the door, and before any of them could notice, dawn turned into sunset. Lith had even tried using fire vision at noon to spot hidden compartments. If a switch was camouflaged under a fake rock, it should have shown a different coloration at his thermal vision when compared with the rest of the rock wall after being heated for hours by Yandra's spell. Unfortunately, even this attempt failed. Lith spent dinner with Yandra and Quilla, comparing notes in search for a solution. The expedition was Lith's best shot at getting his hands on ancient ODI technology that might help him solve his reincarnation problem. If we crack this riddle, and in the future I find more ruins on my own, I'll know how to get in. If we fail despite so many wise mages working together, I might as well check the ODI off my list of possible solutions, he thought. During the third day, Lith started to become restless just like the assistant professors. The older mages knew that solving ancient mysteries required time, effort, and luck, whereas their aides took failure personally. After whispering, "Open sesame," in front of the door, obtaining nothing in return but an awkward echo, Lith asked Professor Gaku, the language expert, "What's the ODI word for friends?" "Glavrish." "What?" After a painful second that shattered his last hopes, he replied, "No reason. I was just curious," he said while Solus laughed her ass off at his expense. When dinner time came, Lith decided to give a break to both himself and Yandra, spending the evening with his friends. After receiving her own skinwalker, Quilla's mood had improved a lot, but she was getting gloomier with each passing day. "Gods, it's so frustrating to me. I'm probably the one that knows more about the ODI among all the assistants taking part in the expedition since I've been researching them for over a year now. Yet my contribution is close to zero," Quilla said. "I'd rather not work while I eat. If I hear another word about a raise, I'm going to scream," Lith said. "But since we are already there, maybe there's something we are missing. When I taught magic to Tista, I improved my foundations by learning from my own teachings. Maybe if you tell us what you know about the ODI, we could better understand their way of thinking." First of all, they were conceited, self-centered bastards, Quilla said with a voice full of spite. Their laws allowed them to have slaves, as long as they weren't ODI, and they treated the other races worse than their cattle. The ODI would use their slaves as guinea pigs, infecting them on purpose with the illnesses they had yet to cure. When healing magic wasn't enough, they would resort to body sculpting, permanently altering their subjects' physiology, trying to make them immune to congenital diseases. Once they achieved perfect health, they moved on altering their appearance so that every member of their race would be born with what they considered to be perfect proportions. For decades they attained countless feats, uncaring for their costs since they weren't the ones paying for it. Then, they tried to defeat aging and failed. You know the rest. They were obsessed with the search for perfection in every aspect of their life. I mean, look at the arrays. The word was enough to make Litha's head throb. The spacing between the runes, the way they overlap with each other, and the door at the same time. It's a seamless formation with no weak points. Lith reviewed his notes inside Solaspedia, comparing them with Quilla's words. "It's indeed an amazing piece of work," he said, his eyes fixated in a blank spot as he examined the runes one by one and forced himself not to puke. Even if there are 5 arrays covering the door, the resulting structure resembles that of a musical score. Each rune is perfectly placed. One flows into another and is reinforced by the other runes surrounding it as it in turn reinforces them. "Yeah, it's almost like, that's it. I think I know how to open that door." Quilla stood up abruptly, flipping her plate. Only a well-timed use of spirit magic saved the innocent food. She dragged Floria and Lith to Professor Gaku's campfire to share her success with them. Gaku was the head of the expedition. Her permission was required before making an attempt at opening the barrier. "We got it all wrong, Professor. There aren't 5 arrays, just one, and I know how to open it," Quilla said. "Nonsense, Mage Ernest. Any of us, you included, can detect 5 different structures and their unique power nodes. We have even identified the purpose of each one of them." "No, that's where you are wrong. You have identified the purpose they have when you take them separately, and that's why there's no solution. Please humor me. What happens if you consider them as a single array? What becomes of their runes?" Professor Gaku sighed, using water magic to write down the information about the different arrays on a single page. "I can't just say no to Mage Ernest. At least she has shown initiative and confidence. The morale is already bad as it is. Trying and failing is better than letting yourself fall into despair, she thought, at least until the entire picture appeared in front of her eyes. This is amazing. The 5 arrays actually do combine into a single one with its own purpose. She blurted out as her colleagues started to huddle up behind her back, looking at the piece of paper in her hands. Chapter 644. Exactly. They split the array into different parts to disguise its real structure. Quilla said. It's more than that, said Professor Neschel, the master warden from the Earth Griffin. The 5 arrays can work both individually and as one. The ODI found a way to make overlapping arrays more than the sum of their parts. But you are right. The final array is the weak spot because once you discover the truth, it allows you to destroy them all at once. It's unbeatable if you don't know the trick behind it. But once you do, you can topple them all like a house of cards. It would be revolutionary otherwise. She sighed. Neschel admired the ODI for their ingenuity and despised them at the same time for their conceit. They had clearly thought that no member of the lesser races would notice the fatal flaw in their creation. Excellent work, Quilla, said Professor Festa from the White Griffin. I'll make sure that you are rewarded properly by the Academy. Without your insight, we might have wasted days standing in front of the door. Thanks, Professor. She was brimming with joy. Can we open it now? Absolutely not. All those present said in unison. We have no idea what lies beyond the gate, and we are all tired. We will work on the 6th array after we are fully recovered and are ready for any surprise the ODI might have left behind. Professor Gaka said. Quilla was kind of disappointed. After struggling so hard and for so long, she had to continue waiting to see if the fruits of her labor would pay off. Lith didn't share her anxiety. He didn't need life vision or mana sense to perceive the danger that kind of array posed to his life. The next morning, the professors used earth magic to conjure a table made of stone and worked together to safely open the door. As soon as all the papers were laid on the stone surface, Lith made his proposal. I don't think that opening the array is a good idea. Destroying it will require the same energy, and it's much safer. Are you insane? More than one professor said. That kind of technique in laying arrays constitutes a relic by itself. Even if it's a faulty product, we could study it and learn a lot about the ancient ODI magic. We might even find a way to improve their creation, Professor Syndra said. Indeed. But what if we open the door, trigger a trap, and the arrays activate again? What if they shoot us in the back the moment we walk through that door? Is a single relic worth our lives? He spoke looking in Floria's eyes. She was the commander of the expedition and the only one who was aware of the anomalies occurred while battling the techs. I agree with Ranger Verhan, she said. Take your time to study and copy the array formation if you must, but no one is going inside until that thing is taken down. The first rule for every combat situation is to have a clear retreat path. If the ODI's defense system identifies us as members of the lesser races and the gate closes behind us, we'd have no time to open it again. Leaving our back exposed is out of the question. My decision is final. What started as a low grumble soon rose in intensity until outraged yells echoed throughout the entire cave. Give it a rest, will you? Morok's voice overcame them all like a roar. We could be attacked by a whole army, and I would miss their arrival because of your yapping. If you want to die, leave me out of it. The bickering went on until it started to grind on Floria's nerves. Maybe you're not familiar with how the army works. The discussion is over, she said. Maybe, and maybe not. Professor Gaku replied. Over 2/3 of the members of the expedition disagree with you. We demand to speak with your commanding officer. How dare you questioning my judgment? Her voice was low, yet it was perfectly audible and scarier than any angry yell or threat. I dare because I think that due to your young age you fail to realize how important this discovery might be, Captain Ernest. Ours is not just the temper tantrum of some old fogies. Gaku replied. We are concerned that your hasty decision can harm the development of magic and the kingdom itself. Not to mention that albeit Ranger Verhan has a point, I believe that your past relationship is affecting your judgment. Being careful is good, being paranoid is not. As the head of the expedition, it's in my right to veto your decision if it damages the kingdom. Fine. Floria knew Gaku was right. Since there was no emergency situation and the army communication amulet still worked, she had to relay the message. Yet it was the first time during her military career that someone had disrespected her orders so blatantly. She broke the communication silence and called the high command, explaining to them everything that had happened. She mentioned Litha's insight on the most recent attack and emphasized the risks that keeping the array would imply. Interesting, Commander Barian replied while tapping his mahogany desk with his forefinger. Who proposed to preserve the array? He asked. Judging from his choice of words and his tone of voice, the professors understood that he agreed with them, so they introduced themselves one by one. With the Mage Association's bleak-looking future, receiving the support of a rising star in the army like Barian could lead to countless benefits. Even some of those who had previously agreed on destroying the formation switched sides. Only Professor Yandra and Professor Syndra were adamant in putting their safety first and didn't change their mind. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your honesty. I have to agree with Captain Ernest and Ranger Verhen. They both have a 100% mission success rate, so I'll trust their judgment since it's the only reason you are still alive. No offense, Professor Gaku, but without Ranger Eerie the coordinates of the ruins would be lost. On top of that, in case the expedition gets wiped out, the kingdom would have lost some of their most valuable subjects. Captain Ernest is right. Study the formation as much as you want and take it down when you are ready. Over and out. Barian's calm attitude disappeared as soon as the communication ended. Damn idiots. I didn't invest so much to keep Ranger Verhen under my command just to lose him to preserve a crappy array. Even if he wasn't there, I would think twice before putting at risk one of the Ernest's daughters on a whim, but two of them? I like my head where it is. Once he managed to calm down, he called his secretary and instructed him to update the status of the expedition. I don't know whether those professors suffered just from hubris or dementia, and I don't care. Flag their personal files as unfit to command for the next missions. Meanwhile, in the cave, Lith was sighing in relief. I'm not willing to risk my life for those morons. Worst case scenario, I'd have been forced to commit insubordination. Luckily for me, Barian earned his spot by working in the field. He thought. Chapter 645. The silver lining is that now we know who is worth protecting and who is just dead weight. Solus said, making Lith worry about her mental condition. She was perfectly fine. It was just that the closer she got to achieve her human body, the more protective toward Lith she became. Solus still valued all lives, but she was willing to make sacrifices to preserve her own happiness. To her, a bunch of suicidal idiots wasn't worth the risk of a lifetime of solitude. Many of the professors swallowed loudly, thinking they had just signed their own death warrant. Gaku, instead, wasn't worried. Barian was just a single man that coincidentally was in charge. There were many others in the army that would share her vision and help her to protect her status. It's pointless to worry about a minor failure. Bureaucrats only care about results. If I bring back something valuable, this blunder will be dismissed as an insignificant incident. She thought. The expedition team started to examine the array down to the smallest details, double-checking everything. Quilla was very annoyed by the prolonged wait. She was eager to see what was on the other side of the wall. It took them half a day to complete their study and another half to make sure that their spell would destroy the formation in the safest way possible. The morning of the second day after Quilla's epiphany, the spell was finally cast. Just as Professor Neschel had predicted, by tampering with the sixth hidden array formed by the overlapping of the other five, their finely balanced structure collapsed. 2 arrays were destroyed, while the other 3 became purely ornamental. The door unlocked, turning on its hinges as if it had been properly preserved for all that time. Moss and dirt fell from its crevices, throwing up a lot of dust. Oh shit, was the collective opinion of the expedition the moment they could see what was waiting for them. Kulo wasn't a city, a village, nor a shelter. It was formed by long rectangular buildings that looked all the same. They had been built out of some unknown pale blue material that was neither rock nor metal. It emitted a bright luminescence that made the whole area around the buildings as clear as the day. The roads connecting the buildings were covered by a layer of dust several centimeters thick. It proved how no creature, living or not, had walked them during the last decades. Each facility had only one access, consisting of wide double doors made of metal and no windows. Each door was sealed by a yellow array visible to the naked eye. It was shaped like 3 concentric circles inscribed with unknown runes and fueled by both purple crystals and the mana geyser underlying Kula. With life vision, Lith could see that there were cable-like devices that ran across the whole compound, carrying the world energy to the various arrays, including those the expedition team had just deactivated. "This is a fucking military base," Morok said, taking the words right out of everyone's mouth. "Lith, what do you see?" Floria asked. Her question made no sense to the others, yet no one dared to move. Any country would react to intruders accessing to a secret compound with extreme prejudice. The ODI were likely to have left a lot of nasty surprises behind. "The coast is clear, but we can't allow ourselves to relax. Everything, and I mean everything, is still perfectly functional." He pointed at the arrays on the doors, which were supposed to have faded centuries before. Lith started to chant gibberish while preparing his spells, quickly followed by Morok and Floria's soldiers. Once he was done with his preparations, he took a step forward. The door in the stone wall started to flash with bright red color and emitted a high-pitched noise. The surviving arrays activated one after another, but because of the damage they had sustained, they could only produce a series of sparks and sizzling before imploding with a thud. Lith kept watching around, waiting for something to happen. Morok's log. "Add to my report how the old fossils would have been the death of us if we didn't destroy the arrays before entering," he said, drawing on himself several mean looks. Morok was about to reply when Litha's prudence paid off. Life vision showed to him a life force rushing through the several centimeters thick dust layer covering the floor, making it come to life. It took the form of a colossus over 3 meters, 10 feet, tall with bright yellow eyes. Aside from the eyes, it had no features nor definite shape. The whole dust cloud was its body, and the creature used it to try and drown Lith. "Oh gods, a sand golem," said Professor Elkes in a panic. "It's supposed to be impossible. Where the heck might the core of that thing be?" Floria didn't care if it was possible or not. The only things worrying her were that it was standing right in front of them, and that Lith had yet to react. "Hold your fire," she said while raising her open hand in the air to reinforce her command. "Sand golem my ass." Lith thought. Golems have no life force, whereas this thing is alive. The obvious response would be to burn it, but if it was me, I would have filled the air with something volatile. Even finely dispersed flour is highly flammable, and if this thing is what I think it is, the resulting explosion might kill me. Lith was right about almost everything. The creature in front of him was alive and flammable, but it wasn't an explosion the real threat fire posed. It was a fungus-like creature he was facing, and the dust was actually its spores. Putting it ablaze would have caused a small explosion strong enough to send them flying everywhere, killing the expedition in a matter of seconds. The creature was capable of moving each spore individually and was using them to flood Litha's respiratory system, making it impossible for him to breathe or cast new spells. The spores were also able to feed upon their host and drain their fluids to increase their numbers. Surviving to such multi-pronged attack was nigh impossible, unless of course one had fusion magic. The darkness coursing through Litha's body fed on the spores and turned them into nourishment, while invigoration allowed him to study their attack pattern. "Ingenious," Lith said while releasing a series of darkness magic pulses that slaughtered his grain-sized opponents. The fungus emitted a prolonged, bass noise that Lith interpreted as pain. The creature retrieved all of its spores, condensing them to assume a physical form. "Gods, there are so many things we can learn from the ODI," Professor Gaku said while following Litha's lead and releasing a wave of darkness energy. The creature opened its body in response, letting the spell harmlessly pass through the empty space it had created. Lith would have liked to give the professor a piece of his mind, but the eyes of the creature were drawing his attention. There was no fury, pain, or battle spirit in them. Lith knew that look. It was how Carl and Tista looked at him when they were little. It was hope. Chapter 646. "That thing is no golem, it's alive," Lith yelled without averting his gaze from the fungal creature in front of him. Life vision and mana sense kept scanning the surroundings, trying to make sense of the creature's odd behavior. Hope? What kind of fool would look at his sworn enemy with hope? Lith thought as a black aura enveloped his body, protecting him from the deadly spores. Maybe you're looking at the issue from the wrong angle. Why would a seemingly immortal creature bother to defend this place? The ODI are no more, and if Mogur's fungi are like those on Earth, killing one is nigh impossible, especially if the spores share a hive mind. One of them is enough to regenerate the whole creature from scratch. Solus pointed out. It shouldn't care. Unless it's bound to this place, of course. Lith thought. His train of thoughts was interrupted by the creature using earth magic to make a hail of stalactites fall from above. Lith had no problem dodging them, but the creature grabbed and used them as clubs. The spores arranged themselves in tendrils capable of freely attacking Lith from every direction. The pseudo-arms had no bones nor joints, so they could change their trajectory at any time, forcing Lith to blink away before being trapped. We need to help him. Callel, Professor Syndra's assistant, was tired of waiting on the sidelines. Unlike the others, he wasn't just a theoretician. One of his specializations was Battle Mage. A wave of his hand unleashed the Tier 5 spell, Firearms. A volley of flaming hands the size of an adult intercepted the clubs and clawed at the enemy at the same time. Each one of the magical hands was made out of air and cyan flames. The wind element allowed them to grab anything without inflicting harm or could boost the flame's intensity at any given time according to the situation. If it's a sand golem, like Professor Gaku says, my spell will turn it into glass. If it's a living being like Ranger Verhen says, then firearms will kill it. No matter the species this bird belongs to, mine is the right stone for the kill. Callel thought. Don't use fire, you idiot. Lith said, crashing Callel's heroic dreams. The spore cloud exploded with a series of small thumps, spreading the mushroom creature's minuscule limbs past the door. Only those like Floria who had blind trust in Lith had prepared a darkness barrier to protect themselves. All the others resorted to air or earth magic, but such elements couldn't do anything against a pollen-sized attack. Callel took the brunt of the spore wave, coughing madly while he started to bleed from all of his orifices due to the mycotoxins the creature released as it grew inside his body. The infection spread so fast that it took its seconds to entirely cover the youth's skin. Light magic is useless, Professor Syndra said after his attempt to save his assistant's life only accelerated the spreading of the disease, which was now also covering Syndra's hands. It's a fungus. Lith yelled with his last breath as the creature now enveloped his body within its own, pummeling at him non-stop with its appendices. Lith could kill the nearby spores with darkness magic, but they were just expendable. The entire Kulla was covered in them, giving the creatures almost infinite mass to draw upon. Lith turtled up, infusing his skinwalker with mana so that the orichalcum protected him from head to toe. The spores couldn't touch him anymore, and the stalactites were just normal weapons. Thanks to the Thunderbird's plume, the skinwalker was immune to blunt attacks, at least until he had enough mana to keep the armor in its boosted form. Any ideas? Lith asked while searching for a way out. Working on it, Solus replied. There must be something that forces the creature to stay here. Now that I know the creature's energy signature, I should be able to locate its core from a distance if I focus hard enough. If it has one, though. Floria and Quilla had their own battle to fight. Aside from Morok and Yandra, the rest of the expedition was dying. Quilla could only treat one person at a time, whereas Floria was racking her brain to find a spell that could turn the tides of the battle. Think, Lith, think. How do you coerce a plant to do your bidding? A hostage? Nonsense. With a hive mind, one is all and all are one. A slave ring? Even more idiotic. How do you put a ring on a bunch of spores? They would just need to cut off the F, that's it. The hive mind is the key. The ODI must have infected part of the spores with some kind of slave agent. It would be enough to take control of the entire creature due to the consciousness the spores share. If I'm right, the enslaved spores must be somewhere nearby. A place where they are protected by random harm, but have enough resources to survive. If it was a sealed container, over time they would have died of starvation. On it. Now that she had at least an idea of what to look for, Solus could restrict her search parameters. Even if his intuition was right, Lith had yet to find a way to escape from his predicament. Most of the spells he had at the ready weren't suitable against such a creature, and origin flames were now an even worse option than they had been before. Even though they were mystical, they were still made of fire, and to make matter worse, they would hurt Lith along with his enemy. He had avoided using them because an explosion made by origin flames might have wiped out both the expedition and Kulla. If we get out of here alive, I'm going to ask for a raise. Morok complained while cleansing another professor from the spores. He wasn't much of a caring guy, but he was aware that as soon as the fungus was done with the fossils, he would be its next target. This is never going to work, Quilla blurted out in desperation. With only 3 healers and 14 patients, some already in critical condition, fighting the spores as if they were not sentient was a losing battle. She stopped treating Professor Festa and started to spread short and weak pulses of darkness magic all around her. Are you insane? Your spell is going to affect us too, Morok said. No, she is a genius just as you are a moron, Yandra said. The pulses she emits are strong enough to prevent the spores from spreading, but weak enough to be stopped by our armors. She's buying us time by acting as a human array. A reckless genius, Yandra thought while treating her next patient as fast as she could. You can't improvise spells, which means she is using first magic. Covering an area that big while keeping such fine control over the pulses must put an immense burden on her body. Yandra was right. Unlike awakened ones, fake makes were unable to stimulate their cores to produce more mana without the help of magic words and hand signs. Even producing the effects of a Tier 1 spells with first magic would endanger their lives. In the meantime, Floria had never felt so helpless. The sword and spells she had practiced so hard were useless against the monstrous fungus, especially now that it held Lith inside its clutches. Chapter 647. I can't use fire unless I want to repeat Callel's mistake. Earth would only squash Lith. The same applies to darkness. I'm no healer, so I can't help the infected. What are the elements I can safely work with? Air and water, Floria thought. A sudden idea popped up inside her head. It was dangerous and likely to backfire, but Floria had learned from her father that she had to fight with the options she had, not those she might want. Regretting to have never learned a single Tier 4 War Mage spell, she unleashed a barrage of the Tier 3 spell, Frostbite. Fake mages couldn't amplify the strength of a spell below Tier 5 at will, so Floria had to compensate for the lack of quality with speed and quantity. A frozen wave after another struck the mass of living spores surrounding Lith, limiting their movements and making those closing in to replace the mass lost due to Lith's dark aura fall to the ground. The fungal cage became thinner by the second as its external layers were frozen and the internal layers were sucked dry by darkness magic. Lith managed to escape by releasing a sudden burst of his aura that scattered the creature's remains away, while Floria's unrelenting barrage of spells prevented the spores from taking a physical form again. Why you didn't do that earlier? Lith asked while flying to her side. Because I was afraid that something like that would happen. The moment she stopped casting to catch her breath, the spores broke out of the ice and started to multiply at a terrifying rate. If something that size lived for so long and kept such a huge mass, then the ODI must have left it plenty of food. Food plus lots of water. Make the problem even bigger. Lith completed the phrase for her. So she was aware of the risks, and yet she used water anyway. How can she still trust me so much that she'd bet her life on me finding a way to beat this thing? Lith thought. Maybe it's not just trust. Maybe she wasn't willing to abandon you. Feelings don't fade just because we want them to. Solus hated it when Lith was so dense, but being cynical also made him blind to the most obvious and cheesy answers. I hate to ask you for this after all the troubles we had to escape from that living prison, but I need you to get back in the belly of the beast. Metaphorically, of course. I can't find anything from here, so if you are right, the corrupted spores are in some place deeper inside Kulla. It would explain why the creature didn't attack as soon as the door was opened. Probably if its consciousness gets too far from the corruption, the mind link might be broken. It had to wait for us to be in position. Lith mind whimpered before saying, Thanks for your help, Floria. Also, please don't get mad at me. Then he seemingly threw in the gutter all of her efforts by charging at full speed against the spore cloud that was now so big that it covered the entire Kulla from her sight. I really hope Lith does have a plan. Otherwise, that creature will have to get in line to kill him, because I called dibs. Floria thought as she was now left alone against a raging storm of deadly spores. Only half the creature was following Lith. The remaining half was determined on crossing the entrance and dealing the finishing blow to the crippled expedition team. Then, it would have all the time to focus on the last invader standing. Well, at least protecting is what I do best. Floria activated her Tier 5 Mage Knight spell, Death Bastion. It conjured a stone wall infused with darkness magic that quickly replaced the open door, sealing Kula's entrance. The spores tried to seep through the crevices in the newly formed rock, but darkness magic killed them faster than they could advance. Then, the creature tried to overpower Floria's control with its own earth magic, but Tier 5 magic allowed her to infuse her will inside her spell. On top of that, darkness magic wouldn't make a distinction between the spores and their mana. It devoured them both, giving Floria an edge in the willpower tug-of-war for the control of the earth surrounding the city gate. On the other side of the gate, Lith moved as fast as a bullet, using waves of dark energy to force the enemy to open a path for him. At the same time, he canceled some of the spells he had at the ready and started weaving new ones that were better suited to handle his current situation. This plan sucks so badly for so many reasons. Lith thought. The ODI should have ordered the creature to protect the container holding the corrupted spores. The closer I get, the more focused on me the creature will become. If on one hand it will help me to understand how close I am from my destination, on the other hand, it's also likely that once I become its only mark, things will get even more difficult. Lith flew above Kulua's blue buildings, but kept himself away from the ceiling. The fungal creature had already proved to be able to manipulate Earth, and the fight was already unfair as it was. Tidal waves of spores were surrounding Lith from all sides. They couldn't keep up with his speed, but they had no need to. The creature was slowly collecting all of its mass, sealing all the possible way outs with living walls made of spores mixed with earth. Each one of the walls was at least 2 meters, 6.6 feet, thick and kept expanding by the second. Their hardness was also increasing, making them able to withstand most Tier 3 spells without effort. The creature had spent centuries trapped inside Kula, with nothing to do but eat, multiply, and develop its skills. Found it, Sola said. Same energy signature, but stuck below the ground. In front of the third building on your left. The moment Lith came 100 meters, 330 feet, close to the container, the defense order took priority. The entirety of the creature moved against Lith, giving Floria and the healers the respite they so desperately needed. Even the spores infecting the expedition members willingly abandoned their victims and tried to reunite with the main body. Unfortunately for them, the moment they were far enough from the humans, Floria, Quilla, Yandra, and Morok shot a darkness pulse that wiped them out from the face of Mogur. Quilla collapsed as soon as she made sure that her patients were alive, not a second sooner. Yandra cursed at her old age. She had not much stamina left, and Quilla was not faring any better than the victims of the spores. Morok was whistling. He had done his part, so he could pretend to be exhausted and wash his hands of the rest. In the meantime, Lith had just landed on the spot Solus had identified. He conjured his Tier 5 spell, Setting Sunday. It generated a globe made of darkness, imbued flames around him to act as his last stand. I'll stall for time, you take care of the container, he said. Solus' glove detached from Lith's arm, using invigoration to make sure there weren't hidden traps or arrays while Lith filled the space of 10 meters, 33 feet, around himself with black flames. His own magic couldn't harm him nor Solus, whereas it would incinerate the fungal creature as if it was paper thrown into the fire. Chapter 648. Lith's problem was that if you toss enough paper at once, it can end up smothering the flames. Fuck me sideways. I wish I had added the air element to the mix. A tornado of black flames would be much harder to overpower, Lith thought while looking at the incoming avalanche. Again, only hindsight is 100% correct, Solus replied. Plus, making 2 elements coexist is already hard. If there was a third one, you would be complaining about not having enough mana to maintain it active for long. As she had feared, the container was protected by several arrays. They were layered one upon the other, to force the enemy to waste their time deactivating them one by one. It was a perfect plan since with the fungal creature on a rampage, Lith and Solus didn't have more than a few seconds at their disposal. Even an invigorated setting sun could only hold for so long. I really hope you ODI are all dead, otherwise I'm going to kill you, Lith said while making the black flames so tightly packed that they almost became solid. The first tidal wave of spore was turned into ash on impact, but the second one managed to penetrate the barrier, and the third went deeper. Tons of spores were crashing on him non-stop from every direction. Lith was too focused on slowing their advance to keep his breathing rhythm. Invigoration had been sealed by the simple raw power of the creature's onslaught. Did they really devise this strategy to fight awakened ones? Lith thought while the enemy was seconds away from eating his face. Nah, you know the ODI. Too arrogant to admit that the devil is in the details. Solus said as the arrays collapsed in unison, allowing her to destroy the corrupted spores. The moment the creature was freed from the mind control spell, it stopped its attack. After that, most of the cloud died, leaving only enough spores to form a humanoid figure that creepily resembled Lith down to the smallest details. He had no idea it was the creature's way to show respect toward a member of another race. /U003C. Thanks, human. Even though we doubt that freeing us was your real purpose, we can't argue with results nor justify our attempts to end your life. /U003E, the creature said. Unfortunately, Lith couldn't understand the beast's language, let alone my seats. He used that moment of respite to rekindle setting sun back to its full power. /U003C. You have no idea of the pain we endured. Centuries of slavery spent having our mind violated every day and forced to increase our numbers despite the pain, having our consciousness split between such a big colony inflicted to us. Will hinder you no more. May the Great Mother bless you. /U003E. The Lith-looking creature beckoned with its hand, and a small ring floated in the space between them. /U003C. We don't know if it's powerful or not. Its magic comes from the accursed ODI, and it's useless to us. We pray it will aid you in your journey. Please forgive us. /U003E. The creature gave him a deep bow before bolting away. Only when Solus and Life Vision confirmed Lith that there were no more spores did he lower his spell. Okay, first of all, how the heck did you crack so many arrays that fast? He asked while using spirit magic to lift the ring before studying it with Life Vision. Lith had no idea what it was, but he could recognize blue glowing runes when he saw them. It was actually an incredibly menial task. What do so many powerful arrays need to work? She asked while studying the ring with her mana sense. Its pseudo-core wasn't very complex, and the gem on top of it was just green. It made both Lith and Solus very happy. A lot of mana. So, Lith replied, do you see mana crystals around here? No. Wait, don't tell me that. Lith couldn't believe that an entire race could be so shrewd and yet so idiotic. Bingo. I just cut the mana crystal cable that supplied the arrays with the world energy from the mana geyser, and they dissipated. Easy as flipping a switch. Solus wrapped herself around Lith's arm before returning to her ring form. Morons. As for the gift the creature left us, it must be a trinket someone lost and never bothered picking it up. Which is awesome. It might as well be our Rosetta Stone for studying runes. Lith thought, putting the ring inside his pocket dimension. Lith had already returned to his peak condition thanks to invigoration. He flew back to Kula's gates to check on Floria and Quilla. Maybe on Yandra too. The rest of the expedition might as well die for what he cared. It's me. Let me out. The creature is gone and the area is safe. Lith said once he reached the Death Bastion. What's my mother's name? Floria asked. She wasn't leaving their lives up to chance. For what she knew, someone or something might have been imitating Lith's voice. Journey. Your father is Orion and your dog Lucky. In name and in fact. Floria dispelled Death Bastion, giving Lith a solid punch in the stomach right before hugging him with enough strength to squeeze out the little air left in his lungs. Thank the gods you are all right. You almost scared me to death. Again. She quickly searched his body for injuries, and when she found none she said, please, help Quilla. She's not getting better. Floria had no idea how he could still be so energetic and couldn't care less. Callel was dead and many others were on the brink of death, Quilla included. Yandra was deathly pale, her breathing was irregular, and she had barely enough life force to remain conscious. Morok was black, blue, and pale as well. Once the creature had ceased its attack, Floria had politely demanded that he pulled his weight. Lith first checked on Quilla. Her life force was so faint that it couldn't hold her mana core together. It was still intact, but her body was already past the point of recovery. Unless one could use invigoration, of course. Lith had her drink a tonic and gave enough life force to fill 2 bowls. Only then did her condition stabilize and her skin turn from pale to pink. Lith then gave a bit of life force to Yandra before moving on to the others. Floria's soldiers and the rest of the assistants were just unconscious. The proper treatments and Quilla's care had prevented them from dying on the spot, but unlike them, the professors weren't so young anymore. They all need life force, and I've not enough for all of them. I can save 1, maybe 2, but the rest is up to their luck and constitution. Saving them all would have meant revealing his secret. Lith wasn't willing to put at risk his entire life work for a bunch of self-entitled strangers. Use mine. Floria offered him her hand, which he promptly examined. That makes 2 more tops, which means that 1 or 2 of them have to die. Make your decision, Captain. In that moment, he wasn't speaking as her friend, but as her field healer. Floria didn't think twice about her answer, and she hated herself for it. Save those who are more likely to survive. It's pointless to waste life force on those who might die even after getting treated. On the battlefield, terrible words had been invented. Resource management, collateral damage, rules of engagement. They were all fancy terms to describe the forms of murder that the human society considered acceptable. Chapter 649. Lith didn't play favorites and obeyed his orders. Professor Gaku was his first choice, being the youngest among her peers and the language expert. Then came Professor Neschel. Her condition was as bad as the others, but she was the only master warden in the group, so Lith presumed he might still need her help. After saving them, Lith had enough strength to save only 1 professor. His choice was between Professor Elkas from the Fire Griffin, the one who was better at deciphering the ODI language, and Professor Syndra, who was a war mage. The ODI's protections were all heavyweight, and Syndra could kill dozens of enemies with a single spell. Professor Festa from the White Griffin was the most useless member of the team. Aside from a historian, she was also a master alchemist and a mage knight. The former was inconsequential for the expedition, and the latter was ruined by his old age. This is up to you, Floria. Both of them can be useful in their own way, and their survival rate is identical. Lith said. He was panting, and his breathing was irregular. Using so many times tier 4 healing magic without invigoration was truly exhausting. Thank the gods Quilla is still unconscious. She would cry her eyes out knowing the old, meek Fester is going to die. Floria thought. She wasn't faring any better than Lith. It was her life force he was using now, and even after drinking a tonic and eating some food, she still needed rest to recover. Is it impossible to save them both? She asked. Lith shook his head in reply. Then save Elkas. So far, all the threats we faced required more brain than bronze. Not to mention that Syndra's contribution to the expedition has less significance compared to Elkas. When Lith was done, both Floria and he were on the verge of fainting. Why didn't you ask Morok to contribute? He asked, glad that Solus was able to keep watch and that it would only take him a few breaths to recover in case something else happened. Because he is already tired from all the healing he performed. We need at least 1 person able to stand guard while we rest. Floria fell asleep the moment she finished her explanation. Lith followed her lead after using invigoration to restore half of his strength, just to be safe. Luckily, the arrays were all still standing since Professor Neschel was alive and well. Morok's guard duty was hellish due to his fatigue, but relatively safe. When Lith woke up, bad news was waiting for the survivors of the expedition team. Professors Festa and Syndra were dead, and so was Nilla, Professor Gaku's assistant. Many tears were being shed, either due to shock or for the loss of precious friends. The professors had known each other for years, and even if they were rivals, they still respected their competition. On top of that, seeing a veteran mage die that easily filled their hearts with the fear of being the next one to fall. Raynor was crying like a lamb sent to slaughter. The easiest expedition, my ass. We're dying like flies. Professor Yandra, please, I want to go home. Field work is bound to be unpredictable, son. We came searching for ruins, and we found a military compound. No one could have predicted this outcome, otherwise the team would have been assembled very differently. It was Callel's naivety that brought this disaster upon himself, and us as well. She replied, bursting into a violent cough she was unable to repress. To save her beloved assistant, the old professor had given her all, and some more. Raynor regained his cool, performing on his mentor a quick diagnostic spell. Oh gods, Professor Yandra, what have you done? Don't speak. You need to rest. He forced her to lie down. Despite her protests, Yandra was now weaker than a child and unable to get up without help. Thinking about his previous words, Raynor felt like an egotistical prick. He went in search of a healer while cursing himself for his helplessness. Quilla was still asleep. The professors were still weakened, leaving only Morok or Lith as a possible choice. Professor Yandra and Ranger Verhen are in a good relationship. He should be willing to help, Raynor thought. The youth was shocked seeing the ranger's appearance. Floria and Morok had suffered no damage as well, but even after 8 hours they still bore the signs of exhaustion. Floria was slightly pale and had bags under her eyes despite having plenty of sleep. Lith, instead, looked like someone who had just arrived there after a relaxing vacation. How is this possible? You have fought that thing, healed people, and yet you look amazing. Do you have a reason to disturb me, or are you just hitting on me? Lith had relieved Morok from guard duty for a while, to allow his fellow ranger to get some sleep. Raynor inwardly cursed and explained to him how dire Yandra's condition was. Lith wouldn't have believed a single word if not for the honest fear he could see in Raynor's eyes. It's impossible. I personally checked on her before going to sleep, but taking a second look can't hurt. You stay here, and if any of the traps I set up make a single noise, scream. Raynor nodded, staring at the tunnels in front of him as they were the open maws of as many beasts, ready to release unknown horrors upon him. He was scared of them, but he was terrified at the idea of losing the closest thing to a family he had ever had, so he calmed his heart and kept an ear to the ground. Lith discovered that Yandra's condition was actually worse than Raynor had described. Her life force was such a mess that he needed to use his Tier 5 scanner and chisel spells to stabilize her. The moment he was done, she opened her eyes abruptly. What the heck did you do to damage yourself that badly? Lith asked. I simply did what was necessary. Raynor and the other assistants needed help. If it wasn't for this old body, the poor Nilla would still be alive. I collapsed before treating her. Yandra sighed. That was stupid of you. It almost cost you your life. Nilla was barely 20. She has had all her life in front of her, whereas I squandered mine. I spent so much time researching magic that I almost lost my family more than once. My children may recognize my face, but they don't know me at all. Her voice was filled with regret while her eyes looked past Lith, staring at visions of all her past mistakes. Yandra now regretted many things and wished she had made different choices in her life. That's why I want to retire and why I approached you. I want someone to relieve me of the burden of my magical legacy. Most of all, I know you can use rejuvenation magic. Please, give me back my strength. I beg of you. I can't keep living like a helpless fool, incapable of protecting even what she holds dear the most. Yandra looked at Lith's face, finding sympathy, compassion, and more. She felt like she was staring into the eyes of an ancient creature, something whose feelings were smothered by the dust of centuries and too many still open wounds. Chapter 650. I can do that, even now, he said, yet Yandra was unable to rejoice at those words. There was no warmth in them. My price is steep, though. As long as it doesn't involve high treason or murder, I'm willing to pay. Be it in gold or artifacts, I don't care. They would be part of my legacy anyway. She replied. Lith was actually more interested in her knowledge. Yandra was a royal forge master and a leading figure among historians. She could help him deciphering the mysteries of Heriol. If only I could trust her, I'd take both the rune sword and the booklet out of my pocket dimension right now. First, I'll make her indebted to me. Then I'll find a way to put her to the test. Maybe I could pretend to find a page of the booklet inside Kulla and study her reaction. Lith kept planning his next moves while rejuvenating Yandra's body. Rejuvenating magic was healing magic capable of detecting and fixing all the marks that the passage of time inflicted on the human body. On paper, it was something simple, but officially there were only 4 mages capable of performing it in the entire Griffin Kingdom. Professors Manohar, Vaster, Marth, and of course Lith. He realigned Yandra's spine and bones while also fixing her muscles. Healing magic was no miracle, it simply sped up the natural healing process. A broken bone would still present traces of being fractured after being healed. Scar tissues would be formed after an internal injury. Rejuvenating magic was the only thing that could rebuild rather than repair an injured body, even returning worn cartilages to their mint condition. Lith did all he could, but was forced to stop halfway through. The damage you have inflicted to your life force needs time to heal. If I proceed any further, it would do you more harm than good, he said. Yandra nodded. She felt terribly fatigued, and even though she had just woken up, the only thing the old professor wanted was to fall asleep again. Yet she could already feel different, as if a weight had been removed from her shoulders and another from her chest. Breathing was much easier, and none of her joints bothered her, no matter the position she took. It doesn't matter, we can always resume later. I feel like I'm 20 years younger, Yandra said before losing consciousness. Lith placed his hand over her shoulder, checking her life force. That was the real source of a human's lifespan. He had treated Nana countless times with rejuvenating magic, allowing her to spend her last years free from all the symptoms of old age, yet death had come for her anyway. She got this close to shorten her lifespan just to help those useless brats, and so did Quilla. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother saving this kind of people over and over, Lith thought. Yet the resemblance between the professor and his old mentor led his hand to sweep her hair away from her face, to let her breathe better. For the same reason you protected Carl from your father when he became his favorite target, or when you choose to take care of Tista's illness. You could have always taken the easy way out and only cared about yourself, Sola said. Yet how would you feel if Quilla died? If any of those few people you let into your life disappeared and you didn't do anything to prevent it? Lith knew the answer all too well. He remembered how he felt after his brother's death. Lith/Derek was Carl's only beneficiary. So between the inheritance and the money Derek had accumulated for his brother's college and wedding, he had so much money he had no idea what to do with them. Yet all he had been left with was an empty life, dragging his feet forward, just waiting for death, well before he discovered to have lung cancer. It was how the void inside of him had been born, and Uriel's death had only made it bigger, just like Nana's. Still upset from Solas's words, Lith returned in front of the tunnels. To Raynor, Lith said, Yandra is okay now. She just needs to rest. Send the other professors to me the moment they wake up. They need to know what kind of monsters we are about to face. The youth thanked him many times, giving Lith such deep bows that his head almost touched the ground. Yet Lith didn't care. His gaze was fixated onto the caves, praying for something to attack him and provide him the opportunity to vent his rage. Thinking about all those he had lost during his lives, Lith had finally realized how close he had come to losing Quilla as well. His hatred the ODI, for what they had done to the fungus creature, was beyond what words could express. With their actions, they had messed with what he could only think of as his turf. The hours passed, and nothing happened. The few creatures that stumbled in the vicinity of the camp ran away as soon as they perceived his murderous intent targeting them. Floria went to keep him company as soon as she was certain that Quilla was out of danger and that nothing had happened to the soldiers she had tasked with guarding Qulla's gate. It seems I'll have to learn healing magic as well. Now I understand why Dad says that a good mage must never stop learning and why my mother is so happy not being a mage. She sighed. Tier 5 is really an edge case. Unless one wants to become a professional healer, but yes, I agree. You should learn at least Tier 4. Regrowing limbs and sharing life force is much more important than one could think. Lith offered her a few sweets from his pocket dimension along with a cup of hot tea. By the way, thanks for saving Quilla. I don't know how you did it, since according to both Yandra and Morok, she was on the brink of death, she said with a casual tone, never stopping to look in his eyes. Thanks for the heads up. Lith nodded, thinking about a plausible explanation for his feat. Yeah, consider that it's amazing how you managed to help her and the others even after an all-out battle against such a powerful creature. There was no curiosity in her voice, only worry. Floria had given up on Lith explaining her how he performed his miracles. She just wanted him to be aware of what the rest of the expedition knew about the most recent events. Sure, Yandra seemed a nice woman and Morok seemed indifferent to anything that didn't involve him directly, but she had learned how deceiving appearances could be. There were few people whom Floria really trusted, and still fewer of whom she thought well. Lith was one of them, and she hoped that one day he would feel the same about her. It wasn't as hard as you might think. Lith lied with such grace that Floria almost fell for it. Unfortunately, almost wasn't enough. dealing another blow to her feelings. Lith explained to her how the creature had been enslaved and that instead of defeating it, he had just set it free. The ODI really were shameless in their use of forbidden magic. After what had happened to Uriel, Floria had a bone to pick against anyone who used slave items almost as big as Lith's.